Yeah, thank you. Looks good with your hands. Really.
I was welcome, but I didn't know. I had a big one. Okay, we're gonna. Penny, can you see everyone all right?
Let me see. Yeah, I mean, it's like a little cloudy, but it's working.
Okay, okay. So if we have a question, we'll just kind of pause you and come over to the computer and so the mic and they can hear you or you can hear them and everything.
Yeah, you know what we could do? I'll just talk a little while and then I'll invite a question.
Okay.
So if questions come up, folks can just write them down. I think it would make it easier, yeah?
Yeah, that's good. However you want.
Yeah, I think easier.
Well, welcome. So happy you're here.
So who do I see everybody? Is that everyone in the training right there?
Except for Michelle.
Michelle, yeah. And Joey. And Joey, don't feel feeling well.
Am I too? I think I'm too much the same color as the pool. Do I look like the pool? Do I need to put on some? I got some green if I need it. Then I'll look like the mountain.
You look good, Kenny. You look good.
All right. I just want to make sure I don't look like just a head floating in space.
No.
All right. Yeah, and behind me, you can't see it with this camera because this camera is it's like meant just for a webcam, so it's just getting me. But behind me is the ocean. Well, I'll try to show you before we get out of here. So I'm looking at what are there? Are there like 8 people in training today?
We have 9 today.
Oh, okay. I just can't see past this gentleman with the notebook open. Is there someone to your left? Ah, yeah. Ah, another gentleman friend. Well, I'm glad you're all here. Thanks for being here. My name's Kenny. I love Pleasure Point. It's like that little space you're sitting in right now is where I used to teach trainings and with Emily and before Emily. And it's so nice to have Kayla involved now too. And yeah, we moved to Costa Rica like 1.5 years ago. We're basically in the middle of the country on the Guanacaste side on the Nicoya Peninsula. And we love it here. Today I took my kids to a soccer game and I had to cross 2 rivers, not on a bridge, but through them and go down like a bunch of dirt roads for 40 minutes. So it's a little different than like when they played in Santa Cruz and you take them down the block, down to the street, down the corner. But it's been good for us. And my kids, we're the only gringo on the team and actually in the whole area over here. So it's nice. It's like pulls you out of your comfort zone a little bit and also allows you to appreciate like a different way of seeing things, a different way of being. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back with Pleasure Point. Are you all if you're from Santa Cruz, raise your hand if you live there now. If you, pretty much, yeah. Is anybody transplant from the East Coast? East Coast, where from?
Yeah, New York.
New York? Ah, I grew up in New Jersey and I lived in Manhattan, like growing up also in Chelsea. Cool. Well, welcome to Santa Cruz. Welcome to Costa Rica. So today, what we'll do is let's just start with you just finished lunch, is that right? Okay. Because we're just going to dinner like 4 o'clock almost. So let's start with just a little bit of a sit, just to bring us back into the room, reconnect us. Just a short meditation. So you can start with your eyes open or your eyes closed. And just feel the whole of your body. And allow for whatever feels safe, can you allow it to relax? If you feel like you can let go, just allow it to go. And noticing your breath. Just bringing your awareness to your breath. And maybe you feel your breath deepen. Maybe it feels smooth. Maybe it feels like it was slightly held. But just bringing your awareness to your breath and allowing it to move. Allowing the breath to become your anchor. They say it's taught that the first mantra is the breath. That which is repeated throughout your life. It becomes a guide. As we bring our awareness to it, we might notice we're not breathing. It reminds us to breathe again. When we're at ease, the breath flows clearly, smoothly. So we come back to that first mantra, the breath. Where do you feel the breath the most? Notice where you feel the breath. And rest into that breath. Just another minute. With the breath, with its movement, to this unique, beautiful body, mind, spirit. The breath of the many. Indifference, connected, in oneness. Loka, samasta, sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. And we make this offering. So on this next breath, just feeling it. That feeling, that desire we have to be happy, to be free. And all beings, may we send that forward. And when you're ready, you can allow your eyes to open, to move as it feels good to you. So today, what I'll share with you, well, first, is it possible just to get your names? That would be a cool place to start. At least I know your name. Hopefully I remember it. But then it just gives me a name to the face. So we'll start on the right side of the room.
Can you excuse me? I can't tell if I'm in the screen or not. Maybe.
I don't know. I hear words. No, you're not. But I hear words. Just peek your head over to your left. There you are.
Right now, man. I'm Moisés.
Moisted,
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
And I'm Elsa.
Elsa. Thank you, Elsa.
Sandy.
Sandy.
Sandy. With like an S.
Say it again.
Sandy.
Am I saying it's not Sandy?
With like SH.
Shandy. Got it. Okay.
Liz.
Liz.
Rain.
Say it again.
Rain.
Rain? Juvia. Got it. Rain. Eva. Michelle. Brandon. All right. I have a nephew named Brandon, so that one's easy.
Gunner.
Wait, hold on. I think you said Gunner, but I don't think that's right. Is that true? It is Gunner. I love it. That's a good name. All right. So, do you remember, did you do that mantra today? Sukhino Om. And how did you do it? Did you chant it together or did you just learn about it? You chanted it? What's that? Harmonium. Nice. With Emily. Was Emily there? No, with Kayla. Wait a second. I don't think I've seen her harmonium much. Can we do this at the end of the day here? Kayla, can you lead us in that mantra at the end of the day? Did she say yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. That would be cool. So I love this mantra. May all beings happy, may all beings be free. And when we think of yoga, this yoga that the approach we're going to talk about today is called like functional yoga. And the idea behind this is that this is what we want for the students. We want them to find happiness or a little bit more and some freedom. Now, it's inevitable we all suffer and we all a little bit. and sometimes we suffer more than others. And sometimes we feel really aligned and free, and sometimes we don't feel so free. I mean, even living here, you would think, oh, they must be happy and feel free all the time. But, you know, just last week went through a few days of like, I don't know why, but something in my heart feels tender or achy, and I didn't know exactly why. And I didn't really do anything to change it except just sit with it, say, that's okay, this is what I feel. And then I realized as I sat with it, it shifts, you know. The tendency is to want to do something to cover it, mask it, get rid of it. Whether it's drink it away, think it away, Netflix it away, sleep it away, complain it away, whatever it is, that we know the tools we use. And like my teachers taught me is to be with it. Now, with that said, as we look at this idea of functional yoga, we realize there's tools that we can use to help us suffer less, to find a little bit more happiness, to find a little bit more freedom, you know. And these tools are meditation, pranayama, asana, maybe mantra, concentration. That yoga, what it does is it gives us all these tools to work with to help you as an individual being feel more free and hopefully feel more connected to the world, environment, nature, the people around us. Functional yoga, why it becomes important is that it looks at the individual. It looks at and recognizes that each person who walks into your room to practice has a slightly different mindset, has a slightly different psychology, has a slightly different physicality, has slightly different anatomy. And this will be sort of our main focus, this anatomical. So we have all these tools in yoga. Now, why yoga has so many tools? We have meditation, pranayama, we have asana, we have chakras, we have the subtle body system, you know, different breathing practices, concentration practices, different types of meditation, different styles of yoga asana. The thing is, we are as different as my eyes are from your eyes, like everybody's eyes different, everybody's fingerprints different. Everybody's walk, their gait, slightly different. So as we acknowledge that, we know that, and it also gives space to the fact that when students come into practice, we need to remember that these are individual beings with their differences. We're connected through things like, you can say spirit, we're connected through vibration, we're connected through, we're all human, we all bleed, we all breathe. So we have all these things that connect us. And on the grandest scale, we're connected, like everything has this same energy flowing through it at different levels of resonance or vibration, but everything has it. So we know that. But we are also different. And this becomes very important as you're teaching physical asana, because oftentimes we're working to we need to get the students into a rough shape. We need to get them breathing, but we also need to recognize that not all poses are equal for everybody. Some posture, a posture for one person can work incredible, where it can be injurious to another person. So functional yoga's approach is to recognize, yes, we're all connected, we are one, and at the same time, we all are different. So one of my philosophy teachers, he would say, I'm something like you, or I'm nothing like you, I'm something like you, nothing like you, something like you, and I'm nothing but you. So that all of those are true. That we're different, we're something alike, and we are the same, that we're connected. And I always thought that was a beautiful thing to remember as we're teaching asana. Because you'll have students come into your room and you'll see them maybe do a pose different than you're teaching it, or you'll see them not do a pose, or you'll see them take a child's pose, and we don't know exactly what's going on. Are they tired that day? Does that pose hurt their joints? Whatever it is, there could be 1,000 different reasons. So in functional yoga, rather than trying to just fit every student into the same practice, we do a similar practice, but rather than trying to fit every body into the same pair of pants, we help people to find what pair of pants fits them best. You know, what posture fits them and works in their body the best. All right. So just general overview. Everybody's slightly different, even though we're united, connected, and the same. The other thing he would say is that yoga isn't the process of trying to get back to the one. It's the process to recognize that all of the difference that we see is the one. It's a different view. This comes from tantric philosophy, which I studied the past 20 years. It's been what's interested me. But this idea that we're not trying to all become the same thing, but that we're actually, it's within the difference that the one is alive and present. You can sit and meditate on a flower and find the vastness of feeling connected to everything. Or you can connect to everything and then see the beauty and the difference of all the nature around us and the different people around us. So I believe it's allowing us to see students for who they are and to honor that. And my greatest goal as a teacher is to teach in a way that the students at some point no longer need me to guide them, that they understand their body well enough that they're free to do their practice of yoga as they see fit for their body. My job is to educate them into how to do that for themselves, to give them the information, the knowledge, and then hopefully the wisdom to be able to explore it, understand it for themselves, right? So, not every meditation will work for everybody. Not every breath practice seems to suit or work for everybody. Not every mantra fits every single body, and not every pose fits every single body. So functional yoga is inviting the students to find for them what's working. Now, it doesn't mean if a student's doing a pose and they come out and they just come out because they're having a tired day. We're also responsible for being like, hey, I can see this in you. You can hold that warrior too. Just hold it one more breath, right? We also want to support them to find the best part, the strongest parts of themselves, but also invite them to be kind and understanding when they do need a break. So we're playing this fine line, but what we don't know is them better than they know themselves. And we want to remember that when they walk in, that they might be having a hard time seeing themselves, but we're even there to reflect to them the best parts and remind them that they have the wisdom to remember, to be able to do this. Like these practices are inside of us. Okay. All right. So functional yoga, this is sort of the approach. Are there any questions just starting now? This was very broad, but we'll start to narrow it down. Okay.
Can you speak more about what you said? You said teach in a way that at some point your students don't need you anymore. What do you mean by that?
So meaning that they have enough wisdom about their bones, their muscles, their movements, their breath, their practices, that they know what really works for them.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean like for a good 12, 15 years, I still have a teacher now. I still have somebody to use as a mirror to see myself. But I also can go live here in Costa Rica without a teacher and get on my mat or sit down on my seat and know what I need for that day, right? And I'll say, like, most of when I've had injuries in my life, most of the healing I've had to do, I get little bits from everybody, but then I had to figure out how to put it together in my body with the correct movements, correct practices to finally heal, right? So it's nice to have teachers to be mirror, but I want to give you and you give to your students enough that they can go home and do their practice. They start to understand, this is my body. This pose stretches this muscle. That pose, I want to stretch, let's say, my hamstring, the back of the leg. Well, standing splits doesn't work for me, but a seated forward fold does. So we give them they gain enough information to know what works. This pose hurts my knee. This pose stretches the same area and my knee feels okay. So we're giving them the info. So it's nice to have a teacher for mirror. I always have somebody I see as teacher and am learning from. But then I also want to remember the innate wisdom that I believe we're born with, that a teacher should be a spark for more than them telling us how and when always to do something, right? So slightly different, like lens. When I started yoga, it was teacher knows and you do what they say. That was it. Yoga teacher knows, you do what they say. They know the poses. They're going to teach you how to do the pose. And that worked for a little while. But then my body was getting injured slightly, and I met a new teacher named Paul Greeley and Susie Greeley, who gave me this functional approach, who said, please teach this, because what we want to do is offer the students their own practice. So we become slightly irrelevant to their process and their growth, that they can do it themselves. And I'm blessed. I studied with them in the Santa Cruz Hills, and I think they've left now though. But they were Paul Greeley, Susie Greeley. They were the founders of Yin Yoga. And this is their approach. They're like, Kenny, you might teach Yin, you might not teach Yin, but please share this idea of a functional approach to practice. So, question. Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. One question. You did Nadi Shodhana today, right? Who did it work for? Who thought that felt good? Who felt like that didn't really work for my body today? Yeah, beautiful. In the old days, I'd be offended, be like, what do you mean it didn't work? This is like ancient passed down practice. But that's exactly what I mean with a functional practice. It could be on another day, it works great. It could be that if I practice it more, I understand the benefits. It could be that, for some reason, this one isn't working with the dynamics of who I am. It could be you have a deviated septum and it's very hard to breathe one side at a time. Okay. So there's no judgment around it. It's some of the practices are going to work for you and some may not work for you. Some poses may work for you and some poses may not work for you. It's starting to rain here. If I have to move, we'll take a break. Okay. So we'll go about an hour, take a break. We'll do that a few times. I don't like to keep you sitting here too long.
It's raining here too.
What's that?
It's raining here.
Oh, is it really? I guess you all sent it here. It just started, like, literally. Wait, can you hear that? Did you hear that noise? No, hold on. It's the howler monkeys. They start howling when it rains. I just heard them start to go. Okay. So in functional yoga, we're gonna look at it like this: aesthetic yoga, and I'll tell you the difference, and functional yoga. A lot of the yoga that's been practiced up to a few years ago was really like aesthetic yoga. It's like, what does the outside shape look like? What functional yoga wants to do, it wants to approach the poses from the inside. And what we know about the inside, like I said, my fingerprints, my eyes, my walk is different than yours and different than the person next to you. Functional yoga looks at your tissue type, your bone structure. And based on your bone structure, your tissue types, you'll be able to do certain things and not other things. Who in this room is it really easy to bend forward and touch your toes? Who's that easy for? Just raise your hand. All right. Who is that difficult for? Who is like, yeah, I'd rather not bend over and touch my toes. Okay. Who are back bends easier for? Just raise your hand. Anybody there? Back bends feel good. Okay. Who are back bends feeling tighter or they hurt? Anybody? All right, good. So now it's really starting to rain, so I got to just move. Hold on one sec. It feels good, but I don't know if the computer will like it. There we go. Second studio. Let me just grab my seat. All right. Who do hip openers feel good for? Like pigeon pose. All right. Oh, nice. Who can do like lotus pose? Like, you know, lotus, one on top of the other leg. Could you always do it? Eva? Is it Eva? Yeah. Could you always do lotus?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. And then those of you who can do the back bends, were you always sort of a back bender or no?
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, this is pretty common. Like me, I could do really deep back bends, but I could barely touch my toes. And so back bends, no problem. Forward folds, I wasn't really interested, but it's probably what I needed more. I was like, back bends, that's cool. I think I was doing too many. I ended up in a back bend, like walking around in a back bend. Okay. So this idea is an aesthetic yoga practices, and I'm going to send you some handouts so that you have this and you can look it over and write to me if you have questions. But an aesthetic yoga practice focuses on how poses should look. Okay. It's like, how should that pose look? Like if you look in Yoga Journal, we're going to be like, what's the pose look like? A functional yoga practice focuses on stressing certain areas, we'll call them target areas of the body. So an aesthetic yoga practices focus on what the pose should look like. And sometimes that works. And then a functional yoga practice stresses, it focuses on stressing a certain target area in the body. For instance, so I'll try to go slow. And I think we'll be together one more time after this. I'm going to try to come there. I want to be like, this works, but I like being in the room with students. I want to like see your down dog, you know? All right. So for instance, when you do a Uttanasana, right, a forward fold, Uttanasana, aesthetic will say, straighten your legs, bend forward, touch the floor, right? That's how it should look. Who in the room can bend forward and touch the floor with straight legs? Just raise your hand. Yeah, great. I'm super happy for you. I am, for real. It is important to be able to do. I think that it's nice to have that flexibility. Okay, now a functional yoga practice will say, how do I stretch my hamstrings? So you might do it with straight legs, brilliant, but it's still Uttanasana, even if your knees are bent and you're bending forward and touching the floor. So functional yoga says, as long as you're stretching that area, the target area, in this case, hamstrings, if the shape is slightly different than the aesthetic point of view, we're doing the pose correctly, right? For instance, down dog. Legs might be straight to get a stretch in the backs of the legs and the calves, or you might have bent knees. And which pose is the better pose? Well, in my point of view, the best pose is the one where you're actually targeting and stressing the given area, right? So slightly different. Because if I try to take the person with bent knees and just get their legs straight, we can cause damage. It can be too much. But if they have bent knees and they feel a stretch in the hamstring, just like the person with straight legs, that's a great pose to me. They might even be up on a block with bent knees. They might be up on a chair with bent knees. They might be at the wall with their hands against the wall, almost like a down dog with bent knees. To me, those are all Uttanasana. You see a slight difference. So rather than chasing a pose, I call it pose chasing when you're just trying to get the perfect shape, rather than just pose chasing, we're thinking, I bend my knees, I feel a stretch, that's beautiful. And in functional yoga, it's not necessary to get 100% stretch, like the deepest stretch you can get. I mean, when I used to practice and someone told me to bend forward, I would bend forward till it felt like my legs were going to explode. But now I was given the gift of, hey, Kenny, back off a little bit. What if you do this pose at 25 to 50%? What if you give just enough to stretch the hamstring? You know, slightly different point of view. It doesn't mean we don't try sometimes and explore, but we're not just chasing posture all the time. We're chasing outer shape. Okay. The functional purpose of the asana practice is to stress tissues in a target area. So the functional purpose of the asana practice is to stress tissues in the target area. This stress is created by stretching. It might be created by contracting, or it might be created by compressing tissue. So think of, I'll give you examples. Like stretching, we just did it, Uttanasana. You stretch the backs of the legs. Contracting would be like plank pose. Engage your core, squeeze the belly strong, right? Compressing would be a pose like child's pose. You're creating compression between your pelvis and your thigh bone. You're creating compression between the femur and the tibia. Does that make sense? So when you sit back, you're compressing tissue so that when you come out, you get increased blood flow. Does that make sense what compression is? Okay. So we stress tissues. This is the main target of the functional practice. So these stresses create change in the muscles and in the fascia, in the tissue of the body. Does anyone know what fascia is? Do you have anybody have a quick definition or example of what fascia is? All right, here, I'll give you one you can use. Anything I tell you today, you can use as a teacher in the future. And you don't have to say I told you it, because someone else told it to me. So this is it. We're just pass on the knowledge and then you share it. So I think a nice way to think of fascia. Fascia is the connective tissue throughout your body. It connects all your ligaments, bones, tendons, muscles. Everything has fascia, or around the organs, fascia. It's the architect, or it's the structure of the body. So fascia is like this. You have an orange. and you peel the skin off the fruit. It's connected to the fruit through that white tissue, right? That is fascia. And then you have the segments connected in a ball. Now you start to peel off each of the segments. And to peel off each of the segments, you have to peel that white tissue apart. So each segment is surrounded by this white tissue. Now you have all the different segments pulled apart. Then you, let's say you take a knife and you cut into one of those segments. And you see, if you hold and look into that cut piece of orange, you'll notice there's little, like, it's almost like muscle fibers. There's little pockets of juice, and each one is separated by more of that white tissue. This is fascia. That example of the way the orange is held together. It's the same as the body. This, if next time you eat an orange, think fascia. Just notice, the white tissue. This connects everything. So in functional yoga, we're also thinking of how we connect, stretch, lengthen, contract this tissue. So your fascia, when you stretch it, as you stretch, create tension, you can create like this pulling apart. When you engage muscle, when you lift weights, when you do plank pose, when you engage your core, now the tissue, not just the muscles, but that fascia is also growing stronger, right? When you go to sleep at night, what do you do when you wake up? You like want to stretch because the fascia has dried up and contracted a little bit. So we stretch to lubricate it again, the same as we do in yoga. That's it. When we lift weights, we get sore. We've like contracted muscles, we've contracted fascia. So the purpose, here's functional yoga sees this as one of the main purposes of yoga asana, is to harmonize the flow of prana in the body. Harmonize the flow of prana in the body. When we stress the tissue, when we focus on certain muscle groups, when we focus on certain areas of the body, we're stressing certain channels, like in Chinese medicine, we call them meridians. Here, we're stressing certain channels, we're lubricating to create more balanced prana. Have you ever left class after Shavasana and you felt better, sort of more aligned, more free? Anybody? Yeah, we have balanced prana. Have you ever left class? My little sister used to tell me this experience. Have you ever left class and felt more frustrated and aggravated? I don't know. I have once in my life for sure. Have you ever felt that? Maybe not. If you haven't, beautiful. My little sister used to try so hard. She used to say, I don't know why I leave asana, I leave yoga practice feeling so frustrated. But she was like blocking prana because she was trying to do it right every time, right? And then she realized I need to be kinder to myself, gentler with myself, and do it in a way that honors my heart, my spirit, my body. And she found herself like, okay, there's that, balancing the prana. So it's meant to balance this flow of prana in the body. Now, after you do a pose, well, usually we wait till the end of class. We get a rebound. You know a rebound? You jump, rebound, you bounce up. Well, you do an asana pose, it creates a certain type of energy in the body. Now, let's just, here's like a little, let's see what you think of this. When you do a forward fold, is it more up regulating or down regulating? Meaning, does it pick you up or does it calm you down? Forward fold. It's more down regulating. So yeah, I would say more down regulating, unless, this is just general, it's more down regulating unless they're super challenging and you feel really tight. Unless you were me. I do forward folds and be like, "Argh!" Like almost aggravate. But in general, they're more down regulating. I was trying too hard. Back bends, would you say more up regulating or down regulating? I would say Back bends tend to be more up-regulating. Okay. When you do a standing pose, warrior 2, warrior 1, warrior 3, any of these triangle pose, trikonasana, would you say more down or up? It's probably, yeah, it's probably a little more up-regulating. What about a hip opener? Does that, like after pigeon, do you feel more grounded or do you feel more, yeah, for most of us, more grounded? Isn't this cool how it works? I don't even know if you learned this yet. You know it in your body. Do you see what I mean? You already have that wisdom. You're like, this pose does this. This pose does this. How about an arm balance? Is it more up or down? Yeah, probably more up. Okay, now we'll get a little trickier. What about a headstand? Which I don't do anymore, but what about a headstand? Yeah, it's going to be more up. Now, what about a shoulder stand or a bridge pose? Is it up or down? It's going to be shoulder stand, tends to be. It stopped raining. This is Costa Rica. It rains like 10 minutes hard and then it stops. But it's more, shoulder stands a little more down regulating. All right. Then finally, what about a twist, like a seated twist or a reclined twist?
I'm gonna say down.
Okay, some say down. Anybody say up? So this is a twist. It's more neutral. If you're down, it can lift you up. If you're up, it can help to ground you. So twist, they consider more neutral. And there's something to explore to see, how do I feel after a twist? So why this little journey into up-regulating, down-regulating poses is, again, it's just general, but this is pretty much what we find, is I'm talking about this idea of a rebound. After you do a pose, each pose leaves you with a certain energy, a certain prana, a certain feeling. So might it or might it not be a good idea to do, let's say, a handstand full wheel and then shavasana? Might you want to do a few poses to down regulate before shavasana? Anybody think maybe a few poses? Yeah. So shavasana is like our ultimate rebound pose. It's the pose at the end of class that we rest. We feel the effects of the practice we just did. We explore the rebound. It's a rebound. It's the sensations, the feeling of everything we just explored. But just to be clear, each posture comes with a rebound, and it's nice in your teaching, in your practice, at times to take moments where you really explore the effects of the posture you just did. Because a little bit of this practice, like it says in the Bhagavad Gita, it goes a long way. But it goes a long way when it helps to sort of bring us further when we stop and we observe, we become aware of the effects. What did the Nadi Shodhana feel like? What is this feeling in my body feel like? What does this emotion feel like? Let me really be with it. What are these thoughts I'm having? Can I just watch them, observe them? Because even our thoughts, right? We have a certain thought, it creates a sensation, like a rebound in the body. Do you know what I mean? We have a thought we don't like, it creates a rebound through the system. It affects our prana. We say something, or we express a certain emotion. Depending on how we express it, it creates a rebound. Depending whether we go into it or try to push it away, it creates a certain vibration in the body. The yoga asanas also have those kind of vibrations. We have a certain posture, we take it. Can we take time to explore it? Here, let's do a pose and just explore the sensations from one side to the other. Okay, ready? Come to standing. I'm gonna have to back up. I might have to talk loud. Let me get the camera up. Okay, so simple posture. Oh, it's nice to see you standing. Just bring your feet together. And we're gonna do a simple mountain pose with a crescent. So inhale your arms up. And with your right hand, hold your left wrist. That's it. Yeah, right hand, left wrist. You got it. Draw your belly in and take it over to your right. Reach down through your feet. Keep your belly drawing in. Take a deep breath. On your exhale, tone your belly. And one more breath. Now inhale, rise up. And exhale, release your hands. And now just notice from left to right. Notice the sensations in the body. Notice what it feels like in the tissue. Let's do the second side. Inhale, arms up. Switch the wrist, switch the grip. Firm your legs, tone your belly. Take it up and over. On your exhales, the belly tones. On the inhales, you find a little bit of lift, length. Keep reaching down through the feet. I'm stretching here the obliques, the sides, the torso. Inhale up and exhale, release. And then just notice, stand in almost like a standing rebound. Just explore the sensations of the pose. So you may say you feel it in the muscles, in the lymph. Yoga would identify also this is affecting prana, the energy in the body. Good, come on back. We'll do a little bit more and then we'll take a break. So, question for you, when you do one side then the other, can you feel the difference between sides? Just raise your hand if you did. Yeah, that would be like giving the students a moment to stretch their obliques, that's the side between the rib and the top of the hip, and to feel what it feels like. Now we've influenced tissue, prana, lymph, blood flow. And just that moment, it's like, okay. It helps one, student to land in their body, two, to explore this idea of prana, or opening up the energy. Awesome. I like that pose because it's so clear and quick to each side that the students can really get a moment to just feel and explore. So functional yoga, it's to explore these meridians, explore the prana, and help students to understand, feel within rebounds. So it might be physical, emotional, and it might even be mental. Like, what's the sensation here? What do I feel here? Okay. So this is important here. This next part of aesthetic versus functional, the limit of range of motion, the limit to our range of motion is either tension or compression. And I'll explain what that means. So the limit to range of motion is either tension or compression. Okay, what does this mean? Tension is the quality of the tissue. So when you bend forward to touch your toes and you feel the backs of the legs start to pull, you're starting to meet tension. You start to feel a stretch. The tension can say, yep, that's enough for today. So this is one of the limits. When do you meet the tension? Where do you meet the tension in this pose? Okay. Compression is the place where bones start to meet. Okay. So for example, let's see, easiest example here would be, I'd say like a pose like pigeon pose. And it's the amount of internal or external rotation you have in a joint. At some point, when you externally rotate your leg, your femur bone and the ball of the femur will meet the acetabulum or the socket in your pelvis. There's some place it will meet. Depending on the shapes of your bones, depending on the way those bones meet in a joint, you have a certain range of motion that once you move through tension, you will at some point meet. Does that make sense? So if I do pigeon pose and I do it for 5 years, and all of a sudden I have no more tension in that posture. I don't feel a big stretch anymore, but my bones stop rotating. You've met compression. You've met the end range of your motion. Now let's take a pose. Like, do this. Just sit in, Baddha Konasana, feet together. Just like that. And now I'll point out where I have tension. I feel tension at the inner thigh. And my knees stay slightly lifted as I meet that tension. Who feels tension at their inner thighs? Who feels no tension at the inner thigh? Yeah. Do you feel any, so you feel no stretch at your inner thigh?
Now I feel like a pinch in my hip flexor more.
Good job. You're meeting compression. Okay, that's good. So if your knees go out wide and you feel it more in the front, where the bone of the femur and the pelvis are meeting, you're probably meeting either bone on bone compression or soft tissue compression. It's where the tissue is getting bound between the femur and the pelvis. Does that make sense? So you get a little pinch. It's pretty normal. It's not abnormal. In my last training, we had like 10 people and 3 people would have a hard time sitting that position for extended periods of time because of that pinch. Yeah. So sitting on height, does that help it a little bit for you?
It's
Yeah.
more, yeah.
What that helps to do is just give a little angle between the pelvis and the femur. It just gives it a little space. That's it. Cool. So the limit to any range of motion is either soft tissue tension or compression, where bones meet or tissue is being compressed. Okay. Does that make sense? Is that okay? I'm trying to we'll keep it really simple. So if you're in a, okay, I'll just stop there. And stop there. Let me give you one more example. Cobra pose. I had a woman, I'll show it, in the Netherlands where I taught for a long time. She came to me really upset because she said her teacher of 15 years was upset with her because she couldn't get higher than like this in Cobra. Her Cobra, it was a Lobra, and that's fine. She just had a low-lying snake. But the teacher said he was disappointed. Your Cobra should be further along. We've been practicing 10 years together. So I had her do Cobra in front of me, and she lifted up, and she lifted maybe 6-8 inches off the floor. And I said, now here, I'm about to give you the most important question you can ask a student. If any adjustment you give them, any pose they're in, the question is, how does that feel? More than do this, do this. If you say do this and do that, you still have to say, how does that feel? Because it's them who will be giving the feedback for us to understand what might or might not work. How does that feel? In the old days, it was like, student, do this, this, and this, and if it hurts, you're doing it wrong, or you got to practice more. I don't agree with that. It could be practice more, you have some tension. It could be, let's adjust it slightly, but we always need to ask, like, how does that feel? So I said to her, and I was taught this by my teachers, how does that feel? She said, I feel like in my low back, there's so much pressure. I said, okay, interesting. Then I'm like, can you do a forward fold? And she can do a forward fold like crazy. I was like, interesting. Do you feel a tension in your back? No tension. So we go back into the Cobra, low-lying Cobra. She shows me where she feels the tension in her back. And I came to understand something. Thanks to my teachers, I realized she was meeting bone. Her bones were meeting. So on your spine, you have the vertebrae, and then the things you feel when you rub your fingers down your back, those are your processes. Some people's processes are further apart, and some are closer together. Hers happened to be very close together, which makes them very stable, which can be a good thing. Further apart can be a good thing, but we can also do too much. Yeah. So I told her, I was like, look, there's something amazing. You don't have to worry about it anymore. This is your posture. Your processes of your spine, they're meeting. So if you have greater space between the processes, you'll be able to go higher. If you have less space naturally between the processes, you won't be able to go as high. I'm like, this is your cobra. The only way to go further now is to remove the compression by removing a process from one of your vertebrae. I was like, that's up to you though. But in that moment, she actually started to cry because she had been so hard on herself and her teacher had been so hard on her. And she realized, like, I'm okay as I am. And in that moment for me, I don't know if for her it seemed powerful, but for me, it felt very powerful because I finally, in the old days, I would have gave her 15 different exercises to do to deepen her back bend. And then as I explored this 10 years ago, I was like, it gave me the power to say, like, this is you and it's beautiful. You're stable in this posture. You know, this is where your body goes. Can you change bone on bone? Maybe a little bit. Can you change tissue tension? A little bit more. But when you meet bone on bone compression, that's sort of end range of motion. So the absolute limit to every range of motion is going to be this idea of compression, where joints meet, joints close, or bone meets bone. Tension we can work with. Compression, we have to say honor and respect it. There's the boundary. Now that's a tricky thing when you're teaching to a big class. That's why you need that question in your back pocket. How does that feel? So if I see you sitting in Baddha Konasana and you feel it in the front of your hip, I know I'm in probably more compression than tension. It's not necessarily muscular if you're not feeling at the inner thigh muscle. Okay. So this is the last point of this aesthetic versus functional. And then we'll take a break. But this becomes very important. It is not necessary to move any target area of any posture to its maximum range of motion to produce healthy prana flow and muscle and fascia tone. So it's not necessary to move a target area. Let's say it's your hamstrings or your glutes for a pigeon pose to a maximum range of motion to produce healthy effects, healthy benefits. Oftentimes in yoga, it was about deepen, deepen, deepen better, but sometimes less is more because we want the yoga practice. So functional yoga says, how do we do this practice in a way that's sustainable? You know, what happens at end range of motion is kind of nice. I'll tell you, you get a high because if you do, like, let's say the full splits and you go for it towards end range of motions, you release what are called end range of motion endorphins and you get high because your body thinks it's about to die. Because your body is like, it thinks it's about to break. So it releases hormones, it releases chemicals into the body to help you to feel like you're okay here. You hit a point of euphoria. That might be fun and okay sometimes, but if you do that all the time, that's a lot of strain on your tissues. Does that make sense? So it doesn't take exposing end range of motion all the time to have a great yoga practice, to feel good in your body, to walk out into the world feeling pulled together. And just from my own experience, I did all the crazy poses. And it at some point it lifted up my prana. And then at another point, I started to realize it was too much and it started depleting me a bit. So then I had to mature in my practice and find that place of balance, that place in the middle. All right. So this is this idea of functional yoga. So if you have poses that you're like, oh, hi.
We lost it on Bluetooth. I'm gonna try and get you back on.
All right. I just see like slide in like Well, we can take a break anyway. Is it back?
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's all right. Well, let's do this. Just let me know if you have any questions. I know that was a lot of info. And I have handouts for you, so you'll have it right in front of you. I'll send those to Kayla. And then you can, it's great to take notes anyway. Sometimes it's better to take notes and then look at the handout. So you don't just rely on the handout, but then you'll reread the info and it'll help to stick. Is there any questions about this? If it works right, we'll do a slideshow just looking at differences in bones and shapes to give us like a little bit more understanding of what we're talking about here with this idea of tension and compression.
Sure, you guys. Kenny, hold on.
Go.
Hi, stand by. We lost your visual.
Uh-oh.
There we are.
Okay,
I have a question.
please.
So when you were talking about the difference between like a compression style pose versus a stretching pose versus like a contraction, I think were the three.
Yeah. Yes, very good. You got it.
So when you are sequencing practice, do you go in a pattern of alternating between those? Do you group them together? Is there no rule around that?
No, you know what? That is awesome. I love that.
Do you take that into account while you're?
Yeah, I'll give you, there's no rough rule around it. There's no rough rule around it, but there is something to know. And this I think becomes important. This is a great question. How long have you been training? 3 weeks? Okay, you're killing it. So when you engage a muscle, contract, that muscle is always more receptive than afterwards to stretch. Okay, so there is a principle within there. There's no rough rule around it, but there is a truth that like if I engage my glute muscle, my butt muscle, then pigeon pose will be a little bit easier afterwards. Or if I do like a plank pose and a core exercise, then do cobra, the tissue in the rectus abdominis will be a little more free after that engagement. Because you have sensors, like neurological sensors in the muscles that when they're engaged, they're like, oh, we're in a safe place. So it's also safer to contract. Now it's also safer to tension or expand. So that's something really cool in your own practice and sequencing to even play with, and in your own yoga practice to explore. Yeah, I love it. That's cool. That's such a great question. And it's something to really to think about when you're teaching. So oftentimes I will do it. I'll engage the hamstring and then we stretch the hamstring, or I'll engage the abdomen, then we'll stretch the abdomen, or I'll engage the upper back and then we'll do a forward fold. So there is a rhythm to it. And when we get to sequencing, Emily will help you see like why you might sequence, and Kayla, why you might sequence certain poses in certain parts of the class. Nice, great question.
A similar question that was more with the up-regulating, down-regulating posture.
Yes.
So do you sequence those in a particular order as well? Like do you, in the beginning of your practice while you're like ramping up, are you doing more of a up-regulating and then the end down-regulating, or do you alternate them throughout the entire class?
That's awesome. Another great sequence question. So you all are ready to explore sequencing. So in a class, so most people come into the room probably upregulated, am I right? So then the first thing we do is sit them down, not for too long because it'll upregulate more, but sit them down and help them to at least notice their breath, down-regulate a little bit, right? Then we usually get them moving, like sun salutations are more upregulating. Standing pose is more upregulating. Arm balance is more upregulating. And before arm balances, we might do some hip openers, which are a little more down regulating, right? So we go, I'll give you like a rough sort of sequence from my head. So we go like, come in, do Om pose or sit, breathe. Then we do some mellow postures, cat cow, right? Preparing some more movement. Then we do sun salutations. And now we start to upregulate, connect with the breath. And then we start to move into like some standing postures. Usually we'll just say this is a basic all levels class. Then some standing postures. And then the standing postures start to open the hips. And then we come down to more down regulating in maybe seated hip openers or pigeon pose. And then from those seated hip openers, pigeon pose, now the hips are open to do maybe crow pose or a few arm balances. And then from those arm balances, now we come down and we might do some seated twist or forward folds. So we're starting to down regulate. And then we come onto our back and we might do some Supta Padangusthasana or hamstring stretches, right? Maybe some reclined twist, happy baby, and we move into Shavasana. So we've gone through this little wave, right? We come in from up, we go down, then we bring them back up. And then we bring them down into the hips. Then we bring them up into maybe an arm balance or two. Then we bring them back down through twist and reclined postures. Then we really bring it down in Shavasana. And hopefully they leave class feeling energetic, but relaxed, like calm. So yes, in the sequence, we're also thinking up-regulating, down-regulating. Now, another way to do it within the sequence is in the breath. Is the inhale up-regulating or down-regulating? That's right. The inhale is more up-regulating. So like, do you know Wim Hof? Has anyone ever heard of this guy? Wim Hof breathing practices. So I studied Wim, and we are doing a lot of up-regulating to stimulate the immune system. Turn on the nervous system. Then exhale would be then, is it more up or down regulating? Yeah, it's more down. So during the asana class, we're working even with the breath. We might have, you ever hear this? Take down dog. Now take a deep breath in and let it all the way out with the sound. And it's like, ah, right? Because it's more down regulating. So even in a up-regulated pose, like let's say warrior two, we might have people focus on the exhale to calm, soften the pose down, to chill it out a little bit, you know? Connect them to the breath. Depending on what class of pose we're doing, it's either up or down regulating. Depending on what part of the breath we're focusing on, it's either more up or down regulating. Now, generally speaking, the asana class we do, your regular Emily, Kayla, drop in, come in, sit down, move a bunch, do Shavasana at the end after some seated or recline poses. These kind of classes, like a Vinyasa flow class, generally speaking, is more up-regulating. A yin class, generally speaking, is more down-regulating. And a lot of that is based on the types of postures we're doing. Okay, I know that was a long answer, but it has many levels. It has the breath, it has which postures, it also has like what time of day. You know, so all these things come into play within the asana practice. How do we up-regulate? How do we down-regulate? And the breathing practices. Are we going more Wim Hof style with more inhales? Are we focusing more exhales? What is Nadi Shodhana? Who felt like it was more down-regulating for them? Who felt like it was more up-regulating? Who felt like it was sort of neutral? Okay. And is there anything else you felt that I didn't mention? I don't know. All right. So Nadi Shodhana is meant to be like calming. It's meant to calm us down. It's meant to balance the prana. If we're up, bring us down into center. If we're down, bring us up back to center. You know, if we're way more left, bring us to middle. If we're way more right, bring us to middle. So this is Nadi Shodhana. So also the breath practices you choose in the beginning of class become important. If it's early morning and you want to get people going, you might do like Kapalabhati, like where they take a small breath in and then and it turns up the energy and they're like awake on a Sunday morning, ready for asana. So right on, up-regulating, down-regulating.
One more quick question in that same subject.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that Shavasana is like the ultimate down-regulating posture.
Yeah.
Do you ever use that mid-class? Like if you're in a really up-regulating class, it's a really hot class, you're really doing a lot of hard postures. Do you find benefit to Shavasana mid-class, like a short one?
Yeah, for sure. I might even, as soon as people walk in the room, even if it's a vinyasa class and not even a yin class, in the yin class I do it too, but I say they come in, they sit down on their mat, we do a little, I probably talk too long and do a little meditation, and then like tell a story about Hanuman or Shiva or something, and then I like first pose Shavasana, and I just lay them down, and we lay down for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then we get up and we move. And I might do it in the middle of class, even on their belly. Let's say we do Shalabhasana, like locust pose, right? You lift up, then have them come to their belly, and then I call it a mini Shavasana. Just take 30 seconds here, feeling the effects of the pose. So yes, I take that idea of rebound or Shavasana, and I implant it in class a bit, because Shavasana is corpse pose, right? It's supposed to be preparation for becoming more spirit than matter, like stepping out of the body. But it's also a reflective pose, time to really reflect and explore what we're feeling. And think about in your life, like you go through a hard time or a beautiful time, or watching a sunset, and you take that moment of pause. It's like a Shavasana, just to be, to experience, to explore. And you can do that anywhere in the asana class. Warrior 2, come into down dog or child's pose. Now just experience, feel what you feel. There's nothing right or wrong here. Just feel what you feel right now in this moment where you are now. So yes, you can use it throughout as it seems suitable to you. And you might find at times it works, at times it doesn't, but to explore it, I think is really nice. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. All right. Any other before we break? Okay. So Cat and Cloud is close, and I love their coffee. So if someone could bring me one, I'd be really stoked. It's we have good coffee here in Costa Rica, but we don't necessarily have baristas, is the thing. Like I would love a barista to be closer to my house. All right, so let's take 10 minutes and then we'll meet back here. So it's about here, it's, what time is it there? Is it 2:55? Yeah. So let's just come back at 3:15. Is that cool? All right, I'll see you at 3:15. Take time to go do what you need to do, get up, stretch. Thanks, you all. All right, I'm gonna shut my camera off for a minute.
Well, sounds good, Penny. We'll see you in a few.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get this. I don't know if it's gonna be big enough. I have like a slideshow, but just showing some bones. So maybe after break, we'll try to look at them. But if it seems too difficult, if you're like, yeah, that doesn't work, then I can always move somewhere else, you know.
Check it out. We've got bones here too. I don't know if that would be helpful or not.
Well, yeah, maybe if we're talking about a certain bone, you show it on the skeleton.
Not as much of a wizard about the bones as you, so.
Don't worry, I can direct you though. I can direct you. I'll direct you. You won't have to do anything. Okay. They'll be easy. They'll be easy. They'll be easy.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my, the neighbor, another daughter was playing.
Yeah. Your parents, we gotta go.
No, I.
I think LeBron's going out. I'm going, right?
Yeah.
So.
I'm not Mexican too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Your mom or dad? First generation is like.
Here's like
Third.
third or fourth.
Nice. If they do a special dance, like a surprise dance. Yeah, so the 15-year-old with her.
Who was that?
It would be very entertaining for doing like the choreographed dance. So they do like a choreographed dance as they walk in, and sometimes they do a special. Kind of like how weddings do like a surprise special dance. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know if you guys.
Right now. Right now. Really?
Yeah. I thought it was just like kind of badass, all the men there like are 30,
She's from the Vader.
Yeah, probably that. No, she not, no, but I did call it out.
It's something close to really like the American. Yeah. He's gonna be cool. Yeah, probably good food. Yeah, I used to work where it's at. Yeah. Over the hill, college, that's right. What time does that start? What's the four? I'm gonna do it. You got a 3 or? No, but hopefully it's on, I have a dress shirt. You should wear it. I am, I'm going to. I wouldn't part of it. Like, I'm not gonna show up. Well, I'm glad you're back in town, man. Yeah. He should just always do that. I love him. He's pretty active. Like, some people. Give you a higher. But it's like super precious. Yeah. From that area, they're not at all. They're not open. Go. Everything is. All right, like. Yeah, I don't know, like, like, well, not that I wasn't feeling it, but it's like. Having a hard time. Right. Feeling right. See, I'm not on anytime about this. Programs are like, this kind of intensive, like, longer. You know, for some people that works. Outside of it. Yeah, that's a lot of information. Yeah. I think we put in at the time. Well, maybe. I'm looking forward to. Good whatever I want. Dude, I show you. Not the one. I'm like, let's look at the. Yeah. Like afterwards. Off the cliff. Cool. Like change up with over. Yeah. Yeah, that is like a break here. Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I think that's on. I look at that. I put it in. Right on. Like the one thing. Yeah, it comes to the button that. It's pretty fun. It's pretty like the same. Yeah. Like that sometimes.
And then you'll have objects with the other.
Yeah, that helps.
Similar, you know, like. One way and kind of like neighbor around it, but with not. If for example. There's some people who try to continue to do. And so the college game do that, and so it's kind of, I would equate it kind of to like, I think what's out there called warrior yoga, super intense. Strength, strength, yoga, right? Is there warrior? I don't know. I thought I heard it once, but. Yeah. I didn't realize that. People have their place. And so, yeah, it would be interesting. I haven't really, I want to see how that, oh, right? Yeah, you're gonna see. But. Static dance, church before you see on Monday night, pretty fun.
Yeah.
Have you gone?
I used to go, yeah, like I used to go quite a bit.
Right, really?
Yeah.
I haven't gone since then. There's a lot of that. Have you ever gone? Ecstatic dance or dance church.
Well, they used to during the summer, Daniel Boulder.
Yeah.
Run it in San I did the one with the.
That's part. And, yeah, I like the vibe. I love it.
Yeah.
Festival vibe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Street dance, you guys are street dance? Apparently it's a festival that's run by collective here. And through, and a bunch of people, but they look at it. That was a long time ago. Yeah. But it's spiritual. for the Brady project. I've gone to Daniel Moeller.
Yeah, he does a lot of like cacao.
That's right, yeah.
I think that's like where it is. Very, he's basically gonna buy land and make it like a camp.
Hey, one, where do you want Mr. Bones?
All right. Can you hear me?
You look so relaxed in Costa Rica vibes. I'm jealous.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Hmm. That's fine. How's that?
No.
No?
Try again. There we go.
Ah,
Okay, I can. Yeah, I can hear you.
okay, good. Very good.
Okay.
I was just saying how relaxing Costa Rica vibes you look.
Got to come here someday.
Well, where do you want Bones? You want him to sit from? Or
Yeah,
you
just
wanna
in-
see him?
No, I don't need to see him. Just in front next to you. Just so they can see him. Her. I don't know. Is it him, her, they? I think it's a they. I think it's a they. I'll tell you why we think it's a they. Because we're going to get into the bones a little bit here. So, all right, we're going to, now I'm not sure if you can see how well you can see the screen from there. Last time we did this, we had a like overhead projector that I was on. So it was a little clearer, but if you have to get really close to a computer screen, that's fine. Because I'll do a slideshow. It won't really be me. I'll just be talking and trying to help you to see some of these bone images. So one thing we do know, okay, is that it's either tension or compression that is the end range of motion. So tension or compression is the end range of motion. And we also know that everybody's bodies, bones, are different. The shapes of their bones, the shapes of the joints. You're even different from the person next to you, but you're also different from your left side to your right side. You can have a different shaped femur bone on your left compared to the femur bone on your right. One hip socket might be more forward, one set more back. And these differences are totally normal. What we're going to look at right now is how these differences in bone shapes make a difference in our postures. What we'll be looking at comes from a sample of 300 different bones that my teacher Paul Greeley and his wife Susie Greeley found. I forget what library it was in, but it was in the basement of a library. They had archived these bones. And they were told that yes, they could take these bones and take photographs of the bones. They believe these bones either came from Chinese, Irish railroad workers that were never claimed. We don't know exactly what ethnic group they came from. And we can't know exactly, this is why bones is a they, you can't know exactly without a DNA test whether the bones come from male or female, okay? Because some would say, oh, if it's wider hips and broader pelvic bones, then it's definitely a female, but it's not always true. And some would say, oh, if it's tighter hips and a smaller pelvis, then it's a male. It was a male, but it's not always true. You can't just tell by the shapes of the bones whether it is male or female. This was confirmed to me by my friend who does forensics. Said you can have an idea, but you have to DNA test to be 100% sure. Okay, so we're gonna just say that's why we're calling these bones, they belong to they. They come from them, whoever they or them are. So what we'll be looking at is a sample of 300, which is actually a very small sample. But what they found in this sample of 300 bones is that all of them were different. The shapes of femurs, the angles of the femur head or the neck of the femur, the size of the pelvis, the shape of the pelvis, the shape of the shoulder blades. So we'll go through the slides, just observe it, and we'll also look at some asana that might be influenced by the shapes of these bones. So we're going away from this idea of tension. We're going to look mostly right now at this idea of compression in the bones themselves. And why then, starting to think about why it's so important that we do a functional yoga practice rather than just an aesthetic, just a shape-based, external shape-based practice. The external shape can definitely have an influence on the internal, but we don't want to just push students just towards this external shape, that there's some perfect shape to achieve. That's what I want to avoid. I want to avoid that there's some perfect pose, some perfect shape that we should all look like. This is what we want to move away from. There is a perfect shape, and it's the shape that is right for your body. It's right for your student's body. And we're looking, how do we do this shape? How do we target certain areas of the body? Okay, so let's see if we can get this. I'm going to share screen. And then I am going to find my slideshow. Give me a second. Boom. Kayla, just let me know. Can you see that?
No, but I'm gonna make you a co-host. I think that will help.
Hold on.
Now
Is
try, Kenny.
Yeah, can you see, is just the slideshow showing up?
No, but try sharing your screen again.
Okay, let me try again. Hold on. Share screen. There we go. Hold on. Okay, try this. Ready? That should be. No? What does it show right now? Me?
Functional approach to yoga.
Oh, okay. So you see it? Everyone can get cozy in front of the computer screen. That's fine. I'll be just sort of off to the side here. Next time we'll make sure we hook it up to a big TV or something. It will work. Okay. So this is a functional approach to yoga, aesthetic versus functional. And what we're gonna look at here is the bones and how the bones play. And actually you can watch the recording of this and you'll be able to see it clearly. How important the shapes of the bones and the differences in our bones, how important of a role they play in actually the asana yoga practice. All right. So we're gonna start first by just looking at two pelvis. You have the one on the left, you have the one on the right. Let me just get a highlighter here, red. What you're looking at, just to be clear, if you look at bones in the room, the skeleton, you're looking, as you look at the front of bones, these pelvis, what you're looking at is the front of the pelvis, okay? So you're looking at the front of two pelvis on the slide. Where the pelvis come together in the front is the pubic symphysis. Where the pelvis meet in the back is the sacrum. So you have in the front, the pubic symphysis, in the back, it's the sacrum. So two bones. And now here, just if you can see the screen, what do you notice about the specimen on the left, which is my friend Susie Greeley's hand holding, and the specimen on the right, which is her husband Paul Greeley holding? What's the difference? Where do you notice some difference?
The crest, the iliac crest is higher on the right. The hip socket are more forward on the left.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Smaller on the left, like it's a shorter connection point.
Also, like the sit bones on the left side are way thicker than on the right side, it seems.
Yeah, it looks like they're bigger, and the ones on the right almost have like a torsion to them. It almost looks like they're twisted more. Cool. So that's all we're looking at. We're beginning to observe, to see like these different shapes. And when students walk in, you might not know exactly what their pelvis looks like, but you're going to see different shaped bodies. You know, you're going to see bodies that you feel, oh, that looks similar to me. And then you'll see bodies that you think, well, that doesn't look as similar to myself. So what I want to highlight here is just the shapes and the way that the sockets, or it's called the acetabulum of the hip, the way they face. So you can see that if the thigh bone was to come out of the side, hold. Let me see if that works. It's almost, you can see like where that leg, the way it would sit and the way it would sort of come out. Like you can almost see, you'd be able to see more of the thigh bone on that right side than you would be able to see on the left. So they're more forward. Our right specimen, the right specimen is more forward facing. It's more forward facing. The one on the left is more, it's more set back, just more set back in the socket. You can't see that whole open socket. So what impact does that have, or may that have on a yoga pose? So you're looking at the front of the pelvis, the femur in the socket. Let's take it and look at what that might start to look like. Now look at it from the top. Now you're looking down into the pelvic bowl. You can see the sacrum in the back. So you're looking at the inner rim of the sacrum. You can see the pubic bone or the pubic symphysis in the front. And then these bones, these are what you sit on, called the ischial tuberosity. And when you look at both sides, the specimen on the right, am I on the right side? The right, or is this your left?
Our left.
Okay, so the specimen on the left, you can see that whole hip socket again. On the right, it's almost hidden. It's deeper. It's more set back. So the way the femur bone comes out of here and the shape of that femur bone might even have an impact on a pose like a forward fold. Okay, let me erase the ink. So if that femur bone is coming out forward, femur bone coming out forward, is it the specimen on the right or the specimen on the left that might have an easier time forward folding? Before the pelvis hits the femur? What do you think?
Left.
Right.
All right, maybe let's look at it. So we just look at those red circles again, and you can see there's more space on that left specimen, more sort of wide open. And then on the right specimen, that socket of the femur. So if you, Kayla, are you right there? Can you just show the femur bone? Just the way, just, it's the thigh bone, and just move it in the hip socket a little bit.
Okay.
Perfect. Can you all see the head of the femur? That's the ball shape that fits into the socket, right? And then the femur, then it runs down and moves down towards the knee. So based on the shape of the acetabulum of that socket and the way that femur bone, or we call it the head of the femur, sits within the acetabulum, that will influence what our forward fold is capable of. So we go, come on. So we go to the next slide. So here we have actually two friends of mine. One woman, the woman in red, with the red shirt, red, white paisley shirt. She's a yoga teacher. The woman on the left is a newbie yoga student. What you're seeing is the woman in the red on the right, her femur bone and her pelvis, because of the shape, she has a deeper socket, hip socket. Because of that shape, her pelvis and her femur, they meet quicker, restricting her forward fold. So we know this to be true because her hamstring has a lot of freedom when she lies on her back and takes her leg like towards her head.
Mhm.
The woman on the left in the purple, she has a little more space. So if we go back to it for a second to the slides, the woman on the left in the purple pants has a little bit more the shape of the femur on the left and the hip socket on the left. It has more space. She can bow forward with more room. The woman on the right, that socket is deeper. So the rim of the pelvis, it starts to meet or compress the tissue and compress onto that thigh bone sooner. So there's a story about the woman on the right too, in the red. She said for a long time, teachers would give her straps around the feet, would have her try to pull herself further down. Teachers would try to push her back further forward, and she wasn't feeling any stretch in her hamstring in the back of the leg. She was feeling most of the pressure around her spine where they were pushing. And in the front of the pelvis, right here, where the rim of the pelvis is meeting the thigh bone. So she'd get a lot of compression and joint pain in the front of the hip, right? So we know that she was starting to meet compression due to the shape of her pelvis and the way the femur sat inside the socket, okay? So is that clear? So for her, she might have a little tension, but here, woman on right in red is meeting more compression. Where the woman on the left, she also will meet compression at some point. You can see where she starts to, the rib cage starts to meet the thighs. The pelvis does start to meet the femur eventually, but she has a lot more space when it comes to the way the femur is sitting inside the acetabulum of the pelvis. Okay, pause. Any questions about that?
So is this where you would offer her an alternate posture to get a hamstring stretch? Like lay her
Yes.
down, do something else to get a hamstring stretch?
That's it. So this is where we talk about functional. Okay, now it's not always, remember, it's not always bone on bone. Sometimes it's just tension. Sometimes the hamstrings are tight. She can't go further any forward because of tension. But in this case, we know she's met compression. Or if you're in your butterfly pose, Baddha Konasana, and you start to go forward and you don't feel it in your inner thighs, but you feel it more where the femur and the pelvis, this area where they meet, we know we're meeting some kind of compression. So you hit the nail on the head. Instead of forcing her to do this forward fold, legs together, do it the same as everybody else, just go into that compression just to feel it. Compression's not always bad, but if we want a hamstring stretch, we might have her take her legs wider apart. We might have her try to bend her knees, or maybe Paschimottanasana, this posture, forward fold, doesn't work for her. We might have her come onto her back and do like a Supta Padangustasana, or just a hamstring stretch on the holding the thigh with a strap. Do you know that pose? Yeah. So it might be you change something in the posture itself, take your legs wider, bend your knees. If those things aren't working, it might be you change the pose, come onto your back, take one leg up, let's stretch one hamstring at a time, or maybe take both legs up. Does that work? So yes. So you'd have to think, hey, how's that feel? I don't feel a hamstring stretch. I feel it in the front of my thigh. It's pinching. Then you know, okay, let's try something else. Legs wider, knees bent, or come on your back. You got it.
What's
So
different besides a standing forward fold and laying on your back and raising your leg? It's the same like folding point. So what changes to make the lying down posture more accessible?
So when you lie down, you're taking gravity out of it, because when you're sitting up and bending forward, it's more difficult for everybody to bend forward sitting up, and it could be causing more compression. And when you lie on your back, you can also change the angle of your femur. You can take it out to the left a little bit, or you can take it out to the right a little bit. So seated forward folds are going to always be the most challenging position for the pelvis femur. So if you take some weight off, that can change it. But also if you change the angle of the femur bone slightly, that can change it. Yeah. She might even have an easier time standing up, folding forward, because you have more access to feet apart. It changes the way gravity affects the joint changes. She might bend her knees. It's a little bit easier. So that's where how does that feel come into play? Like, where do you find your hamstring stretch? If I was teaching a class and I was teaching Paschimottanasana, and you have to be kind of quick, right? Let's say you have 10 people in class. You might not be able to give like 45 different options. So you just, right here, you'd say, how's that feel? I feel it in the front of my thigh. What if you take your legs wider? Oh, that's better. Or you might just say, try it on your back. Can you feel a stretch in the back of your leg, lifting one leg up? So you just give a quick option to see if that helps. Yeah. Every position, every position of your foot, every position of your pelvis can have an influence on what's going on with the joint and any compression. All right. So we're going to look at, now we're looking, if you turn bones to the side, just turn them sideways, or turn them sideways. What you're looking at here is the pelvis from the side. Here you have the sacrum that connects the two sides of the ilium. You have the sacrum and the tailbone. Here you have the acetabulum, or the socket, where the femur bone goes into. Then you have the sit bones, or the ischial tuberosity. And you have the pubic bone in the front. So we're getting a side view. And what I want you to look at is just the position of that acetabulum. the position of the socket, and how different these two beings' sockets are. You might notice even the size of their pelvises are slightly different. The size and shape of the sacrum is different. The shape, sizes of the sit bones are different. The shape of the pubic symphysis is different. So we have all these differences. And then as we look at the sockets, that arrow on your left, just representing the direction the femur bone would be sitting. On your right, that little point, you'd almost be looking right at the side of the femur. If you look at Mr. Bones or Mrs. Bones standing there, you would see the femur bone going directly into hip socket. This is going to have an influence on my good friend Robbie. Okay, so what I want you to think about, we're coming back to this butterfly pose. We have the femur bones inside the hip socket. Is it the, let's try to figure out, is Robbie's hip socket the one on the left or the one on the right? You'll know who Robbie is because his knees are up in his ears. All right. So Robbie, he was a professional speed skater, like trying out for an Olympic team in Europe. Robbie, you can see him, he's laughing, he's got the gray shirt on. He's laughing because for years, his knees have only gone to there. There's been a lot of angle. And he's a yoga teacher as well. And everyone, they've tried everything. They try bend forward, take your feet further forward. Let me push your knees down, you know, use straps. They've tried a bit of everything for Robbie. Well, what's interesting about Robbie, if you push on his left or his right knee, his whole body will rock to the left or right. This is a clue that he's in compression, that he doesn't feel much of an inner thigh stretch, maybe a little, but if you push on his knees, he'll tip over. So when we look at it, we look at Robbie on the right and Johan on the left in the red shirt. Whose hips belong to who? Which one, let's go back. Which one is Robbie's pelvis? Is it left or right? You're right. It's the left side. He has less room between his femur bone and the rim, that rim, let me erase some of that ink, and that rim of the pelvis. So his femur bone, as it comes out of as it moves out from the joint space, he has less space as he goes to open his knees out to the side. He's hitting that rim of the pelvis. So Robbie on the right belongs to pelvis on the left. Joachim on the left belongs to pelvis on the right. He has more space, more room to open the legs up. He has more space before he meets or hits compression, let's say. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what I want us to think about, just as we start to explore teaching, is like not everybody will look the same. And if they move through tension, they might be able to go further. But there's also the end range of motion is always going to be this point of compression. And if a student doesn't feel a stretch in the target area, say it's the inner thighs or the hamstrings, but they feel more of a pinch or a pain, then you know, they're probably something is blocking. And what is it? Okay. So now what you're looking at, what we're going to look at, we're looking at two femur bones. Anybody in the room, what do you notice the difference from the left specimen to the specimen on the right? What are some differences? If you don't know the anatomical names, don't worry about it. Just see if you can describe what you're seeing. Okay, go ahead.
The angle of the femur head in comparison to like the femur body.
Okay, so the angle of the femur head in comparison to the femur body. Yeah. Which one has more angle?
That one.
Yeah. All right, gave it away. Yeah, you got it. So the one on the right has more angle. The one on the left has less angle. Anything else you notice?
The nodule point, like at the top of the femur bone, is more prominent on the left side one.
Yeah. So this one is more prominent. This one, am I on the right one?
I was speaking more to the top of like the straightest point of the femur bone. So if you just go, yeah, right there.
Ah, yeah. Look at it's really interesting. Look how they're almost like level here. And then look at the difference there. Boom. There's a big difference. That's really cool. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is the degrees. Now we measure it out. So we have 100° on the left side and 130° on the right. So when we talk about like this fitting into a pelvis, what effect might this have in yoga poses, right? All right, so we got femur inclination. Now, where this might have an effect is for a pose like triangle, right? You come into triangle pose. Kayla, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you take Bones' leg, just try to arrange it almost just one leg, like the front leg in triangle pose, and just lift it until the bones start to sort of meet. So this is depending on the inclination of the femur. Some people may get compression or meet bone on bone contact before they get a hamstring stretch, where this processes of the femur is meeting the pelvis, like in this 100° angle, it'll hit quicker than at the femur with the inclination of 130. So depending on the inclination and also depending on the femur neck length, it can have an impact on when you take the leg into what's called abduction or away from center. So you may be able to lift the leg higher out to the side or not, depending on the inclination and the neck length. Okay, thank you. So look at this next slide. The length of the neck. This is the neck from here to here. Can you see that?
Mhm.
This is the neck of the femur. Look at this little neck. And it could be a smaller person, but it might be even a bigger person. We don't know exactly. DNA test. But you can see there's a big difference. We go from inclination, where you can have a big difference, to even inclination, and then to femur neck length. This can play a part in posture. Which specimen, left or right, just guessing, would be able to lift their leg out to the side higher? Yeah, probably the specimen on the left will be able to lift the leg out to the side higher. Yeah. So we think of poses like maybe half moon, we think a triangle pose, like this will all have an impact. So we look again at that neck length, and then we're going to move forward. Okay, so now what you're looking at, what we're looking at is this is where the knee fits in, or the kneecap would glide here. This is where the kneecap would glide. We're looking at a femur from above, a femur from above. So here we're looking at a left femur. Does that make sense? We have 1, 2, 3. We have 6 on the table. So just observing from specimen 1 to specimen 6, just observing any differences. And just looking, what are some differences you might notice? What are some things you see here? Anything.
I mean, I'm seeing a lot of what we've talked about with differences in the way that the femur head would fit into the socket from all of these. All of them look pretty different at that point, especially the one on the very right. Is that like an injury or something? What?
I know, it's wild, right? It looks completely different than the one all the way on the left. No, it's not an injury, and it's probably, they say this is all normal for general population, that all these specimens are normal and within range for general population, but there's that much different within the range of what's possible and the potential here within these bones. So we see different neck lengths, we see different, the shape of the femur head, the direction of the femur head. You notice even the length of each of these bones, the whole femur bone, different lengths in these bones. We would assume the shorter one is to a shorter person, but it's not always true. It could be a long femur and a short torso. It can be a short femur and a long torso. So we have all these different variations. So we go through this, we look at these specimens 1 all the way to 6. And then we put them on the table with the kneecap or the knee, the back of the knee flat on the table. So now they all have the back of the knee flat on a table. And what we look at is that bones, they have inclination, they have neck length, but also bones they grow in a spiral. They grow in a twist, which is called torsion. So everyone has it, and some bones have it more than others. So if we look at specimen 1, and then we notice that there's slight torsion, a little more torsion with each specimen. And then we place number 1 and number 6 down on the table next to each other, 1 and 6. We realize just how much variation there can be within the bones. Now, this could be an injury, but it also is within normal range. But now, if we think about this, now what's the shape of each of these persons' pelvis? Depending on the shape of the pelvis, there may be some things that the person on bones on the left versus bones on the right can or can't do. Certain places they may or may not meet compression. We might have feet that turn in or feet that turn out, thighs that turn in or thighs that turn out. So we can't just assume it's all soft tissue. We also need to remember that at the root of things, at the bones of things, students are working with what they have, and everybody is slightly different. What do you think of that difference? I don't know. I think it's incredible. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like,
I had no idea. It's like amazing. I had no idea. Like, it'd be so different person to person that's both considered normal.
yeah, both normal. When you look at, do you see Mr. Mrs. they bones in front of you? Every skeleton you see in like anatomy labs or in anatomy classes or in yoga classes, those skeletons basically all come from the same mold.
Yeah.
So they're always the same. So then the assumption is made that this is what the bones look like. But when we really break it down, when we really look at it, we know that what's sitting in front of you is actually a lie. It's sort of, it gives us a map, but it's not the terrain. When we really look at individual bones and human beings, we start to notice just how much difference there is. Some people have more length in bones. Some people have more inclination. Some people have more torsion. Some have less torsion. Some have more torsion on just the right leg. Some have more torsion on the left leg. Different shaped pelvises, different shape. Like this is why this is what makes teaching so incredible and never ending, is because when people walk into your room, we all sort of look the same. So we're something like each other, but we're also totally different and unique. And it's actually true that there's a lot of difference. So starting to learn to teach to that, it becomes important to have a tool, and that tool is, how does that feel? Like, what is the target area? What are we trying to stretch in this pose or strengthen? And how do we do it? And does that work for each student's body? Okay. So there is a lot of difference. All right. So I had a friend in the Netherlands I told you about. I talked about the processes. These are the first 5 lumbar vertebrae in the spine. So you have the sacrum, and then on top of that, you have the lumbar vertebrae. These are the first 5 of those vertebrae. So L5 all the way, or L1 all the way to L5. Okay. All right. So L1 to L5, L1 to L5. So what I want you to notice are the processes. These processes, these are the little shark fins, dolphin fins that you can feel when you touch your spine. You can feel those on the back. Depending, and of course here, they're not there now, but you have discs in between each of these vertebrae. When you die, those discs go back into the earth, basically. They're absorbed. All right. So here, if you look at the space between these processes, you just start to see, if you look at the specimen on the right, very sort of little space between each of these processes. If you look at the specimen on the left, a little more space between these processes. And then, wow, what happens here? Look at all that space. These 2 processes probably meet in a back bend. So who would have the deeper back bend? Specimen on the left or specimen on the right?
Well,
Probably the specimen on the left. Now tell me, who does the specimen on the left belong to? Does it belong to orange shirt or purple shirt?
orange.
That's it. Most likely, our friend on the left has a lot of space. It might not be in all processes, but at least 1 or 2. And to me, if you look, he kind of is, he's almost at 90 here. He almost does like a 90-degree right at these 1 or 2 processes here. So it might be L4, L5. He has a lot of space. On the right, our friend in the purple also has a little more space in that same area, but he has less space through the rest of the processes. Now, many times people are like, well, it looks like the guy in the orange shirt is also more flexible. Yeah, it could be. Maybe his thighs are more open, his chest is more open, but he also has the gift of spinal space. You know, he has a lot of room through those vertebrae. So our estimation is that he has a little bit more space between 1, 2, 3, or 4 processes. So when we teach a pose like Cobra, this becomes really important, because we don't necessarily need to see everybody be able to do a deep, deep back bend. A little bit of compression on the spine can be healthy. Too much compression in the spine, whether you're flexible or not, whether you have closed processes or not, can be too much. So here's a question. What is the function of a pose like Cobra? Why are we doing it? Why are we doing Cobra pose?
Is it to counteract a forward fold, or to Open up the abdominals. Oh, yeah, or stretch the abdominals.
Good. So open up the abdominals, maybe open up the pecs, the chest, the upper body, right? So this is going to be the main function. Now, what about bridge pose? Is it similar? When you do bridge pose, what area is being stretched in bridge pose, right? Bridge on your back, knees bent, hips up, shoulders on floor, hands might be interlaced. What's the function?
That's more a hip flexor, isn't it? Like the front part of the hips and like,
Yeah, that's it. So when you bend the knees, it's going to get a little more hip flexor. It's still going to stretch the quadriceps a bit, and it's going to stretch the rectus abdominis, and it's going to open up the chest. So it'll have similar, but it will have a little bit more also, right? Now, depending on the shapes of these processes, your bridge or your cobra might look deeper or not as deep. Also based on the tension in your tissue. But we want to know, okay, why are we doing this pose? What are we doing? So maybe we're working to create a little healthy compression in the spine. Maybe we're working to open the chest, the abdominals, the hip flexors, the thighs. What we want to do is think about the purpose of the pose before we think about everyone needs to do the same pose and look the same way. Because if you type in cobra pose, oftentimes like Google it, you're going to see a certain shape and a certain depth. So what I want us to remember is how deep, how far the pose looks isn't the goal. It's, are we targeting, are we creating tension, a little bit of stress in the areas of the posture we want to, and are we doing it in a safe way, and is it effective? Does that make sense? So my friend who did cobra, and she could only lift up a little bit, it did 0 to stretch her abdominals. But when you put her on her back in bridge pose and bend the knees, now she gets a little thigh stretch. Now she can use her shoulders drawing back to lift her chest a little. She gets a little stretch in her chest, a little more stretch into her abdominals, and a stretch through her thighs. So why are we doing any given pose at any given time? What's the purpose? Like, what is the target? What's the focus? Maybe it's just to look pretty, and that's cool. But also as a teacher to know, like, why am I doing this? Why am I teaching this pose right now? What? And even if I just want to teach that pose because it fits into the sequence well, to know, like, what does that pose target and what does it do? Does that make sense? Know why you're teaching the pose. Okay. We'll look at one more and then we'll take a break. All right. We'll look at a little bit of, let's look at, what's easiest? Let's look at this. Okay. So what you're looking at is the humerus. So we looked at the femur on the leg. Now we're looking at the humerus, the bone on the upper arm. Okay. What you're looking at here, where the arrow is, this is called the bicipital groove. This is where the tendon of your bicep runs. So the bicep and then the bicipital groove. What you see here is that when we lay the bone, this part of the bone, down on the table, and we lay these two bones in the same direction, you get a different angle of the bicipital groove. So what we're seeing is that the bones on the left have more torsion, it twists more, okay? And what does this really do to a posture? Well, we'll look at that. So then here you look, same thing, bicipital groove, and look at the angle or the torsion on the left compared to the right. That arm has a lot of twist. So now we look at my two friends, Anat and wait, I forgot your name, bro. And Marcel. So Marcel, he's actually one of my best friends, but I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I froze for a second. Marcel studied with Anat. Anat is an amazing yin yoga teacher. She studied right under my teachers, Paul and Susie Greeley. But I paused because Anat just recently passed away from like a bout of cancer. So God rest her soul. She's an incredible, beautiful human being. And she helped put this slideshow together for me. So a knot has a lot of torsion in her humerus. This became very important because in yoga, when you lower yoga, all the teachers were telling a knot to bring her hands in more and squeeze her elbows in. A knot was having really bad shoulder pain. She went to my teachers, Paul and Susie Greeley, and they said, a knot, hold your hands down at your side. And when she held her hands down at her side, her palms just naturally turned really far out. So when she bent her elbows, her hands go really far out to the side. When Marcel's hands hang more like mine, the thumbs hang straight, turn in more. And when I lift my arms, my elbows are closer and my hands are closer to my shoulders. So when Anat lifts her arms, her hands go out. Marcel and I lift our arms, hands go in. When Anat started taking her hands and turning them out and taking her elbows a little bit wider, she found, and not squeezing them in, she started to heal her shoulder pain. So do this just for fun. I'll try to see if I can see all of you. Stand up and then just let your arms walk a little bit and then let your arms hang where they hang. Just let them hang where they hang. All right. I might need your help here, Kayla. So just stand, let your hands hang where they hang, and then look for the person whose hands turn in the most. And then bring them to the center of the room. And then look for the person whose hands turn out the most and bring them to the center of the room. Whose hands turn out the most? Who's turn in? Who's turn out? I feel like I see a turn out. I can't tell if I'm right. That's it. That's what I'm looking. Okay, that's really cool. Now just do this. Now just without changing any position of your hands, just bend your elbow and see where your hands go. Just bend your elbow. Don't change anything and see where your hands go. Oh gosh, I can't see you, but I can see the difference already. Yeah, there we go. I can see it. So is that Ava?
Yeah.
Ava, that's beautiful. You have like a knot arms a little bit. I love it. And then who's the other being?
Michelle.
Michelle. So a little more similar to Marcel's, but yours still go out a little bit. Now everybody do this. Relax, and you guys can step back. Thanks for the sample. Now just do this. Everybody, Kayla, see if you notice anything. Everybody just relax and now bend your elbows and see where your arms go. Okay, sometimes it happens. There's not many of us, but does anybody have, when they lift their arms, does anyone go in more and out more? Do they land in different areas? Or is it all pretty uniform from left to right?
You're pretty symmetrical beings.
Because once in a while you'll see this. One hand's here and the other hand's here. It does happen. You might notice it even just a little bit, you know?
Maybe.
Yeah, okay. So cool. So come on, take a seat. So what we recognize, just even in that little exercise, as I look, everyone has slightly different torsion. And Ava is blessed with this incredible torsion, or probably like external rotated torsion in the humerus. So what that means is like poses like down dog, poses like plank pose, poses like all fours like cat cow, poses like chaturanga. Like for my friend Marcel on the left, he really likes in down dog, it's helped his shoulder to take the hands a little wider than shoulder distance. For Anat, it's helped her in her chaturanga to take the hands a little wider and allow her elbows to open up in the almost push up, right? So what you hear often in chaturanga is squeeze elbows in, and it might be a good instruction, really good for some people, but it might not be really good for everybody. So if you have someone who has shoulder pain, you might explore, what if you take your hands wider, turn your hands slightly in, turn your hands slightly out. Functional yoga. So a functional approach, rather than everybody do this, you might give one or two different options. Yeah. Which it takes skill, but you're going to get it. You're going to develop it. Here's the difference. So for Anat to have a healthy chaturanga, she needs to take her elbows wide, which actually, if you go to the gym, that's pretty common, right? But in yoga, it was like, don't do that. But in the gym, it was like, do that. And actually, it's like, is what's right? Is it right or wrong? And the answer is yes. For somebody, it's right. For somebody, it might be wrong. So we also, this takes me to the point, at times, yes, we can use our own practice to help us decide how and what we're going to teach. But also, we can't just use our own practice to use it in our sensations, feelings, and our shape to use it to guide other people. Does that make sense? We need to remember that if it feels one way for us, it doesn't always feel that way for somebody else. We need our practice to help us to understand, to pass on information, but what we do doesn't always work for somebody else. So I think the best thing we can do as a group of teachers and in a community like Pleasure Point is inspire each other to find what's working and to get feedback mirror from teacher, what seems to be working better for your body. All right. So we're going to just look at the shoulder blade, and then we gotta take a break. All right. So turn Mr. I keep calling him Mr. because we used to call him Mr. Bones. Turn Mr. Mrs. Turn they bones around. Because we don't know if it's a Mr. and we don't know if it's a Mr. All right. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at the scapula, the shoulder blade. Can you just touch the shoulder blade? All right. That's the shoulder blade. What you see, so you're looking at the back of the shoulder blade right now. You're looking at the socket, the shoulder socket. And above the shoulder socket is the acromion. It's like the roof. And then the arm would be coming, sorry, it's hard to draw with this little arrow, would be coming right out of there. The arm would be coming right out of there. That's really a bad arm. All right. So just, you have the humerus, it connects at the glenoid process of the scapula, and then that little rim over the top, that's called the acromion process. Why is this important? So with acromion abduction, abduct means to move away from the middle. It moves away from the middle. So if I were to lift, when I lift my arm out to the side, this is abduction. Okay. So you can see if I lift on this specimen on the left, if I were to lift the arm out to the side and take it up into the air, it has more angle, more space before it meets the acromion. The specimen on the right, I have less space. Can you see that angle before it meets the acromion? Let's do that again. So we lift the humerus of the left specimen. Now we go to lift the humerus of the right specimen. So one specimen based on the shape of the bone, the acromion will have more abduction. You can sheet it and maybe wrap around it, but it'll naturally have less space. Then we look at flexion. Flexion is when you take your arm like overhead, and the humerus will at some point will meet this acromion, will meet the roof. So we take the arm overhead. Oh, I gotta erase that. We take the arm overhead, and at some point, the humerus is going to meet this acromion. So the specimen on the left is going to allow for more overhead action. Now, how do you test this on yourself? The specimen on the right will allow for less. What you have to do is fix the scapula, or just draw the shoulder down, and then go to lift. Here, do it. Come standing with me. It's way easier because your ribs become an indicator of when this happens. So you fix the shoulder a bit and you start to lift just the arm up, and notice when, as your arm starts to go overhead, when do you need to allow your ribs to pop up? Notice when the ribs pop up, or when it feels like you got to take the arm around, out to the side and around. So you lift the arm up, keep the ribs in, don't let the ribs pop out, and notice where your arms stop. Now let the ribs pop out a little bit and notice where your arm goes to. Okay, now second side. Draw your ribs in, front of the ribs, pull them into the body. You might fix the shoulder, but now start to lift that arm up and notice when you start to hit some resistance. You feel like, oh, it's like I want it to go. It's not a stretch thing, but it just won't go. Notice when you hit it. That's it. All right, now relax. So there is a point, the rib cage becomes an indicator. When the ribs start to pop up, you know you've met the roof, the humerus has met the scapula. You've met. For a long time, I was doing handstands, and my teachers would always tell me, they'd say, okay, get your arms straight. Now pull your ribs in. But then if I pulled my ribs in, my arms would go forward. I had to allow my ribs to go out to get my ears alongside my bicep because I don't have a lot of range of motion. My bones meet quickly as my arms go overhead. So what's that look like in a pose? Well, let's look at down dog. Come on down. Guess who the longtime yoga teacher is? It's the woman in pink on the right. Newer student on the left. Now, which scapula belongs to our friend? Which scapula belongs to our friend in the pink? Is it right or left? Say it again.
Right.
It's the right. So right scapula. She's got her ribs pulled in. Look, watch, ready? Ribs pulled in. Arm comes overhead. And that's where she stops. She meets compression. Her humerus bone, the upper arm bone, meets the acromion of the scapula. If she let her ribs drop down, she might be able to go lower and deeper towards the floor. Okay? But we keep her ribs knitted in as she does the pose, so we can see, where does she meet resistance in the upper body? Where does she meet compression? Now you look at the left. Notice forehead on floor. Okay. Notice also the ribs aren't jutting out. They're not. The ribs are actually pretty knitted in. But look at all the space at the shoulder joint. She has more like the scapula on the left. There is more room before she meets compression. Now, is it necessarily good for her body to go this deep? I don't know. We'd have to check in with her. Could she be going too deep into joint and causing too much pain? Could be. Could the woman on the right be still, even though this is where she stays, she looks higher up, still, if she pushes really hard, she can also have a trouble, right? So we know naturally there's different joint angles, different shapes of bone that allow for different movements. But to really see how the student is doing, we need to check in. How does that feel? On the right, maybe she's like, I'm meeting compression. It feels like too much. Could still be the same thing on the left. I'm meeting compression, feels like too much. Yeah. So
how do you deal with asymmetry in a situation like that? If somebody had like way more available on one side than the other in like a down dog position?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if it was like extreme, I'd probably seek towards the balance of both sides. You're never going to get it perfect. Like one of the philosophies in Tantra is Vikrokti, the whole world is crooked. But what I don't want to see is if like she's dropping really far in one arm and it's causing spinal issues, then we know we want to come back closer towards symmetry. Yeah. I'd probably go closer towards symmetry. I had this problem, like my left hip, I can externally rotate it a lot and do hip openers like pigeon and fire log. But my right side, I thought it was tissue. So I was always fighting to try to open it. Where my right side stayed really healthy because it had sort of bone resistance. On my left side, I kept tweaking the tissue because I had opened it so far that I would like kind of, the more flexible side was getting injured. So I had to, over time, I stabilized the left more and just let it match the right and allowed myself to be okay with that, you know? So that is something to observe in your own practice. And as a teacher, I had like a left side that was always more free. So I would demonstrate and show the students my left side and not my right. And it was causing further asymmetry. So in your own yoga practice, you want to observe your tissue. Is the tissue on the right and the left? What's the difference? But then also observe, what kind of rotation do I have in my femurs on the right to the left? What kind of movement do I have? My arms right to left? And I would say like kind of word of caution is, don't just go deeper into the side that seems more open. Don't think the side that seems more closed is a negative. It could actually, that stability could be very beneficial to the body. We want to play. Here's what I think. I don't think of yoga as, I think yoga was pushed too long as just like flexibility. But I think real strength and to get prana flow correct, you want the balance between stability and we can call it flexibility, but then together I'd say good mobility. We want mobility. We want to be able to move through the world freely and without pain. And I think for me, this becomes the target of the practice. How do we build healthy prana in the system? And it's that balance, stability, flexibility, creating balance. Do I have mobility? Do I have movement in the joints? So I would say we're looking for that kind of balance. I feel like when I entered the yoga world, it was really like, do more yoga, get more flexible. And then I saw my body rejecting it. It was like, it told me like, you need to stabilize yourself. Like the flexibility is great, but you also need stability. So how do we create that balance, you know? All right.
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm learning a lot about the different like the different bones and how they're fitting into the different joints and sockets and how that can affect your yoga practice. I have a question that's more pertaining to fascia though, because in my understanding, that's like what you said, but fascia is also used as like a protective mechanism if you get an injury. And correct me if you know something different, but it builds up and it creates like your joint to be held in a certain place to where if you're not doing fascia release and actually working on releasing that fascia, it could appear as a skeletal difference from side to side, but not, I would say, like in my own guess, it's probably more likely that it's going to be a fascia thing if you've got injured on your shoulder, or maybe you're a surfer or something where you have a predisposition to pop up on your board in a certain way, and then the fascia builds around that point and then creates imbalance that way. So as a teacher, how are you deciphering? I mean, I guess asking how does that feel, but how are you deciphering and encouraging your students to release fascia and then identifying when it's a bone issue?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And it's not always totally obvious. But for example, if you're feeling the pain in the direction you're going, so if you're going forward and you're feeling a pinch between the pelvis and the femur, you know, then you're thinking you're hitting compression. If you're going backwards and you're feeling like the pinch in the back around the spine, you know you're meeting compression. But if I'm going backwards and I'm feeling a lot of tension down by the pubic bone, we know we're hitting some more tension. Does that make sense in a way? And if I'm going forward and I feel the tensions in the hamstrings and around the spine, then I know, okay, that's tension. Usually compression is in the direction you're going. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's just break those down. Compression is usually the direction you're going, whether it's forward, back, or to the side. Tension is usually the thing you're moving away from. So if you bow forward, your hamstring stretch, right? Now, if you're like, let's say someone's in down dog and their shoulder just always hurts them, or like they're doing plank pose or chaturangas. Now we're like, why is it hurting? Well, is it bone on bone? No, it's probably not a compression thing. Is it a tension thing? Well, it could be a tension caused by they damaged it. The fascia laid down scar tissue to try to protect it. And now they have, like, they're compromised in the shoulder, right? So yes, fascia, when you create an injury, even in a hamstring, in a joint capsule, your body is really smart. It'll start to first it'll start to lay down tissue to stabilize that joint. So if you dislocate a shoulder, it tries to lay down tissue to start to stabilize the joint. The fascia lays down scar tissue, really thick tissue to help protect. Yeah. Now this is a tricky one because that tissue it lays down could be necessary to hold things together to protect it. I've seen oftentimes how do I explain? Okay, wait, hold on. Now, what can happen though, is if you open that up too quickly without the muscular and fascial support, you can create more damage to a shoulder. Okay, so if someone's in down dog and they have pain in the joint, and then you're like, let me massage it or do all these stretches for it, and then they go back into down dog and do like a plank or a chaturanga, that could actually be damaging. Like that fascia that it laid down in scar tissue could actually be exactly what it needs. And then we think, let's try to open it up. So if we're going to open up fascia or open up even any fascia in this body, we want to make sure it also has stability. Yeah. So if I have an injury, here's how I have to treat it. If I have an injury, like I had a herniated disc in my neck at one point, and it always felt tight. And the tight was saying it was tight because it was like, we're here to protect you. So sometimes someone would work on it and it would feel way worse after. So then I started doing different exercises to stabilize the musculature and the fascia around the injury. Then when somebody would help release it, I started getting better. So the tissue that laid down around that herniated disc, it was freezing me up to protect me. It wasn't freezing me up. It wasn't a bad thing. It was like a neck brace without the brace. And then I realized I needed more strength. So then I would do exercises to help stabilize it. Then I could start to release it a little bit more and free it up. So fascia and scar tissue is very smart. It's the same with a low back. If you'd injured a low back, it lays down scar tissue to protect. It lays down thicker bands of that white stuff inside the orange rind. It lays it down like a tree. A tree gets an injury and it lays down that thick tissue and it becomes like almost like a ball or a bump, but it's to heal it. So that tissue is really healing. Yeah. We just want to do it in the right way. If someone has an injury, what muscles aren't working let's turn on the muscles that haven't been helping the support, right? The shoulder's weak. Let's turn on the core. Let's turn on the pecs. Let's turn on the external rotators around the humerus. Let's turn on the internal rotators. Let's turn on the abductors. Like what hasn't been working? So you have a really good point. We do want fascia to open, but just opening fascia too quickly, that's actually working as like a protective mechanism or like a band-aid. You need to make sure that that area is supported before you just free it up. I don't know,
Right.
that's a long answer, but
But would you, like, as a professional, after class, talk to that person about going to a physical therapist and releasing and then strengthening those areas? Or do you just alter the practice to fit what they can handle?
yeah, if you don't, you could do both. if you don't have the skills to know what poses or postures might help support it more, or, you know, help to build strength around it, you might suggest that they just minimize or change, do variations on the posture to help protect, you know, or use a certain prop, or like if it's in their shoulder, for example, do plank pose on your knees, you know. And then you might suggest like, hey, have you seen somebody about this? Are you working with somebody, or you might want to see somebody, you know, based on this injury in your fascia, because this is also functional. It's not functional if they come in and they're like, I love yoga and I've had this injury, and every time I do yoga, my shoulder hurts after. Now the yoga has become less functional. But your approach is, you said, hey, maybe physical therapy. Hey, what muscle groups can we turn on in this asana practice to help support? Then it becomes functional. Now we're moving towards healing and health, right? That's the direction we want to go. So yes to both those: physical therapists, exercises, and maybe alternatives to postures that create irritation.
Hey, Kenny, do you have any resources for dislocated shoulders, just offhand, that you could maybe send to Kayla?
Hey, that's cool. Let me, I'll find some for you though. I'll point you in the right direction.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, let me look up, let me write it down. Let me just look up and see who and, you know, what sources and who works with them, and yeah, get you dialed into for yourself or other for getting it stable and keeping it connected. Just in general with dislocated shoulders, things, you know, like handstands, arm balances, even down dogs, it would be like to minimize that like deep range of motion, because dislocation, we want more stability. So thinking in the practice, how do I create more stability than rather more flexibility at this point? It could be, though, there could be a muscle group you need to open up a little bit while you engage another one to help support it and keep it in socket.
I'm always the wet blanket here, but I just also want to say that, like, I feel, at least myself,
Yeah.
I'm interested in anatomy and all this, but like, I don't think that we're anywhere nearly qualified to like diagnose things.
No, you're not going to diagnose. Yeah.
Whether you're like a therapist in yoga or just a yoga teacher, like if someone suspects they have a dislocated shoulder, like they should not be in class until they have it checked out by someone who can diagnose. And you can
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I guarantee you will have people who have had dislocated shoulders in your class, you know, and maybe they've recovered, but we can't diagnose. We're not doctors, we're not physical therapists, but we are working with people's bodies. So what our job is to minimize injury, maximize benefits, you know. So I think a yoga studio, I do think like having an intake and knowing everybody's, like, hey, here comes Julie. She's had an issue with her right shoulder or her left knee. And as teacher, I could look at that and be like, okay, at least I know that. And I can offer variations or modifications. So if I know someone's had a dislocated shoulder, I can't diagnose it. I can't say that's a dislocated shoulder. And I can suggest, hey, you might want to see a physical therapist, or, you know, go see somebody, a doctor, to get this checked out. But what I can do is minimize risk, you know, and help to, and actually I did train like 10 years in yoga therapy, but it's still not physical therapist. But I know, okay, here's something you can do to help stabilize shoulder. But again, you're going to have people, and you're not always going to know. And you can even say, hey, please come to me if you have anything I should know. And people won't always come. There'll be herniated disc, there'll be shoulders that have been dislocated, there'll be torn meniscus or knee surgeries, there's going to be low back stuff. So the best we can do is have people, how does that feel? Listen to themselves, give as much support as we can, but also right? We can't diagnose. So you're exactly right. I agree with you 150%. But you have to know that also people will come in with those things. Does anyone in the room right now have anything they have to be careful of in yoga? Any part of your body you have to treat in a certain way? I do. A neck, a low back, a knee, you know, a shoulder. So there's certain ways I have to practice. So just that's why in the asana class, being able to offer modifications or variations becomes like super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our responsibility to know, you know, enough about the human body if we're gonna do something that involves physical activity, like not hurt people. I just meant more like when they're like in the acute phase of something that
Yeah.
happens. And also, yeah, you know, at a certain point, it's really up to the adult individual to tell you, and if they don't,
Yeah.
what you can do.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. One time I was teaching in Belgium and this guy wanted to interview me, and he was talking about like the psychology of yoga, and I have a psychology degree, but I'm not a psychologist. And he said something, and I was like, well, if somebody came to me, I can give them certain tools, but I would tell them they need to see a professional. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Doesn't psychology or yoga help work on psychology? I was like, yeah, but I'm not a psychologist, so I can't claim to be that or offer any guidance with that. I can say, you know, I know about certain breathing practices and asana practice can make us or help us to feel better at times, but I can't diagnose or act like someone's psychologist. You know, I can sit there and listen, they can talk to me, and I can say, oh, do you need some names? Would you like to, I have some names if you'd like to visit somebody, you know? So I completely agree with you, you know? I think that's a really good point and something really good to remember. And then how do we find variations to maximize benefits and decrease risk? And I think that's what functional yoga, that's our main approach. Because anything, the yoga itself can be medicine or it can be poison. How do we make it medicine for ourselves and offer that? How do people find them for themselves? You know. So yeah, I don't know. Are we on the same? I think we're on the same page. I don't know. How do you feel, Ava? I feel the same as you. Yeah. I don't know. And someone might come in, you know, with acute if they and then it has to be up to you if they come and say, hey, I had a dislocated shoulder last week. You might say, oh, I'm not comfortable to teach that right now. You know, I'm not prepared for that. I'm not ready to teach to that. That's okay too. So, right on. Okay, anybody else, right, before we move forward? I mean, this is like huge topic. Because we only got like a half hour to go. But you just did about 4 hours. All right. Maybe it feels like 4 hours. To me, it doesn't, but okay. One more. So we'll come back just to this functional bone. So you're looking at the back of a scapula, and then we're going to take a break. We're looking at the back of a scapula. You're looking at where the humerus will come out of. So the back side. So whose arm, as they take it behind them, could probably lift higher? Specimen on left or right?
Yeah.
Specimen on left. There's just more space between the humerus and the acromion of the scapula. As we look at the next image, who has the scapula on the left? Is it going to be brown shirt or blue shirt?
Brown.
Yeah, she has more space. She probably has something more like the scapula on the left. Now, when we look at this posture, if we split the hands and use a strap, I feel like in my yoga class, always a block. Everyone has a block. Everyone has a strap and probably a blanket, even if I don't use them all. And a strap for a shoulder stretch can be really beneficial. So when she straps, woman in blue straps her hands and opens the hands further apart, it gives her room to go around the acromion of the scapula to take the shoulders a little further, which might be beneficial to give her more of a stretch in the pecs, in the front of the upper body. So sometimes you'll see people go to grab their hands and their arms are straight, and then they bring their hands together and then their elbows have to bend. So hands together is the deepest. Hands split gives a little more space. Strap gives more space. General principle, when the feet are closer together, there's less movement in the pelvis. As you take the feet wider apart, the pelvis will have more movement. And it's the same in the shoulders. When the hands are pulled together closer, whether it's the front of the body or the back of the body, you have less movement. When you split the hands further apart, you'll have more movement. Okay, more space for movement. So just stand up for just a second before we break. And take your feet close together, and then just move your pelvis left to right, forward, back, and notice how it feels. Just notice. Just check out the movements you got. Now take your feet wider than your hips. You can even let the knees bend a little bit. And now take your pelvis left to right, forward, back. Maybe it's circles, and notice the movement you got. That's it. Now take the hands together in front of the body. Squeeze your hands together and go to lift your arms overhead. And then take the hands a little wider than the shoulders and lift the arms overhead. That's it. Now take the hands back behind you, interlace the fingers, pull the hands together, and try to lift your hands up. So this could be bone, this could be soft tissue. Now pull your palms apart, let your fingers just hook, and lift your hands up. Good, and then chill. So a general principle is when you have space at the feet or between the hands, you'll have more movement, more range of motion, more space. So this is what we're looking at. Okay, more space, more movement. So we start to understand these general principles. We start to understand about tension and compression. And we start to understand what's called target areas. So each pose has a specific target area, and based on the individual we're teaching to, either creating more or less space, either using prop or no prop, variation or modification may or may not benefit said student. But it becomes very important that we remember that students are unique. And we go back to the question, how does that feel? So we let them be an experience for self. And if they come to also, like if we feel we're able to handle it through modifications, and if we feel unprepared for that, we might send them or have them outsourced to somewhere else. Yeah, okay. So I think that's good for right now. We might look at one more pose when we come back. If you have any questions when you come back, feel free, let me know. We're going to take another just a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at, is it 4:55 there? It'll be, yeah. So we'll come back at 4:55, and then we'll have like 30 minutes left, and then we'll close. All right. So when we come back, we're gonna, just real quick, we're gonna look at the target areas. I'm gonna give you a list of those target areas, really simple anatomy for yoga teachers. As you memorize this anatomy, you'll carry it throughout the training with you. I'll give you handouts on it. But as you start to understand the anatomy, which I believe is very, very important for a yoga teacher, because we're not just putting people's in poses, we're working with people's anatomy, so we should know it, that it'll give you clues to how to modify or adjust poses when necessary. All right, have a good break. Thanks so much. I'll see you in a little bit. Take 10.
Oh.
It was comfortable though.
What is that app for the? All right. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm going to share screen just one more time. I just want to show you one more bone image that I think you're going to see it in class often. It's when somebody comes into chair pose or into a squat, like it's called malasana, and how the bones can have an effect and what we can do to help remedy.
Kenny, can you,
Screen share.
come a little closer to your mic?
Okay.
Thank you.
So what we're seeing here is chair pose. And what I want you to look at is the angle between the ankle and the foot. This area is called the talus. The talus is what allows for what's called dorsiflexion. Ooh. So we look at this angle. We notice fellow in the black shirt has a lot more dorsiflexion. That angle really between the shin and the foot, where our friend in the red is almost, it's maybe 100 degrees. Other friend is more like 130. So he gets a lot of angle. And this could have to do with the shape of the talus, or the compression you get between the tibia and the bones of the foot. So how to help somebody in a pose like malasana, a low squat, or chair pose, is you create via a prop modified pose by putting a blanket underneath the heels. The blanket then allows the student to come even a little bit lower into the chair pose, or power pose, like I like to call it. So sometimes it has to do with tight hips, tight thighs, tight calves, but it can also have to do with, and even if it is tension, it can also have to do with the shape of the bones in the foot, between the foot, talus, tibia. So in any of those cases, you can modify by having someone roll up their mat, use a blanket, or even their heels on blocks. Okay. There's more, and then it's also with the neck in shoulder stands, depending on the shape, the bones in the neck, the tension in the tissue. For some people, shoulder stand can be safe, for others, no. My friend Rose, she's a good friend from Europe. Rose, her chin does not touch her chest unless she lifts the chest to meet the chin. My other friend Vera, her chin can touch the chest, just keeping the chest right where it is. Said shoulder stands then look slightly different based on this. And using a blanket can help Rose, or just doing less angle or more angle in the hips helps Rose. So there's no pressure in the neck. So to conclude, you are unique, and therefore what works for you, what suits your body, will be different from what works for other bodies and other people. A great book that goes into this really scientifically, that explores angles and joints and bones and tissue, is a book by Bernie Clark called Your Body, Your Yoga. It's more like a scientific journal, but it has great information, and you just read it and break it up into little parts. Because I do believe it becomes our responsibility as a yoga teacher. We need to know anatomy. We need to know what may or may not be safe for certain people. If they say, I have pain here, you know, we need to know if someone says, I have a strain in my hamstring, how to modify the posture. If they have a strain in their hamstring, whether it's bend your knees or go up on a block. So learning the anatomy becomes important, and is really at the forethought of this functional yoga, so that we have an idea of what's happening, you know, that we're aware of the anatomy to take care, looking at both inside and not just the aesthetic shape. So with that, I'll send this to you, but this is just a really basic overview of the anatomy. So in functional yoga, we have 3 sutras. A sutra is a thread of thought that embodies the practice of what we're teaching. So a thread of thought. So the first functional yoga sutra is this idea: the purpose of yoga asana is to harmonize the flow of prana in the body. And we're talking about asana now. So harmonize, how do we harmonize this flow? And we do this, we accomplish this by targeting and stressing what we would call 14 skeletal segments, 14 parts of the skeleton, or 10 myofascial groups. Myofascial just means muscle, but it includes fascia because you can't separate the two. So myofascial groups. So there's 24 target areas. Okay, we'll go over those in just a moment. And it'll be easier than you think. So
Are you?
number two, functional approach to yoga, there's no perfect pose. Every hand, foot, and pelvis position either helps or inhibits our ability to stress the target area. The most effective way to do this may vary from person to person. And then finally, number three, every bone in every body is
Hold
different.
on, Kenny.
What's easy for
Hold
one
on.
skeleton may be difficult for another. Okay, go.
Can you hear us, Kenny? Kenny,
Check 1, 2.
can you hear us?
Just let me know when you can hear me.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Now I can, yeah.
Now you can. Okay,
Can't hear him.
hold on. Can you type in something?
Type in
No.
something.
Hold on.
Okay.
Can you try talking?
Yeah, hello.
So you can hear us now.
Uh-huh,
Can you hear us?
yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're good. We
okay,
had a little, yeah. All
okay.
right.
So then finally, this third piece is this idea: every bone in everybody is different. What's easy for one skeleton, or I'd like to add even one tissue type, can be difficult or impossible for another.
You missed the second piece when the.
Okay. In a functional approach to yoga, every foot, hand, or pelvis position will either help or inhibit our ability to stress a target area. Okay, so this is it. So 3, we maximize the flow of prana in the body. We use our hands, feet, pelvis to help target or help stress target areas. And then finally, what works for one person might not always work for the second person. So we just recognize that there's this uniqueness. So with that, there's going to be homework with this. So do this with me. I'll send you the handout. And this homework will just be simply starting to look at the postures in your sequence and say, what area is this posture targeting? Like, why am I teaching this posture? Because even if you just are teaching just movement and flow, each posture is going to have an effect on people. So we need to know like what that effect is. You'll have a student say, where should I be feeling this? And you want to know, oh, your hamstring or your quadricep or your hip flexor or in your glute. Like, it is important to know, to be clear on this. Okay, so here it goes. Here, stand up with me. Let me see if I can get in this. I don't know if I can get my whole body in here. I'm gonna have to back up so far. Here, we'll just start. I'm gonna do it seated. You do it up. Okay, so here comes. These are the 14 skeletal segments. If you remember these skeletal segments, you got the skeleton of the body memorized and you're in a good place and you can use it in yoga. So we're gonna go, these are phalanges. So you can call them phalanges or toes. Just wiggle your toes. Lift one foot up, wiggle your toes. Toes, and then move the foot. Here, this is the talus. Now just move your knee. This is the tibia, right? Okay, so toes, say it with me, toes,
Toes.
talus, tibia.
Yeah.
Then this one is femur,
Femur.
that's it. And then here, I'm gonna stand now, I can get pelvis,
Pelvis.
that's it. So let's go from there. Toes,
Talus.
talus, tibia,
Femur.
femur, pelvis. Now we go up the spine. What's the first section? First 5 is lumbar. Then the next 12 are thoracic. And then the next 7 are cervical. Then we go from there, we go to the fingers or phalanges. Then we go wrist. Then we go, now this one's important, radius. This bone, the radius, it's on the thumb side. It allows you to do the rad. Oh yeah, that's rad. Radius. And then here's ulna, it's your elbow, ulna. And then this bone is your humerus. And we'll get to the last one in a second. So what is it? It's fingers, wrist, radius, it rolls, radius, ulna, and then humerus. That's it. Now the next one, we put 2 together because we have, what's this bone called? Your, yeah, or your scavicle. The collarbone is the scavicle. And then what's this one on your back called? Oh, you froze. Quickly.
That's a scapula.
Kenny, are you there? He's frozen. Might restart the meeting. All right. Yes.
There we go. Hello. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, that was weird. I think we had a powered like surge here and then went off. Okay, here we go. All right. So when you get up to here, you have the scapula, or sorry, scapula, scavicle. So when you try to move just one of these, ready? Touch your scavicle. And now try to move your scapula, the shoulder blade. Okay, now touch your shoulder blade around the armpit and try to keep it still while you move, sorry, your clavicle. So you can't. These two are connected, they work together. So to keep it really simple, we just call it the scavicle. Rather than the scapula and the clavicle, we just go scavicle. And I kept saying that. I've already said it like 4 times. I know. I was like, wait a sec. I kept saying scavicle. This is your clavicle. This is your scapula. So stand up one more time. We're going to do the whole thing together. I just want, so it's in your brain, because then we're going to do myofascial groups. And plus, you've been sitting a long time. So it goes, okay, ready? So it goes toes, talus, tibia, then it goes femur, pelvis, lumbar, thoracic, cervical, fingers, wrist, radius, ulna, and then together, this is the scapula, and the clavicle is the scapula. Okay, these are all the bones in the body to remember for yoga. You can break it down even further or go more descriptive, but if you have that and the movements, because now you're getting the movements, you're going toes, talus, tibia, femur, pelvis, lumbar, thoracic. When you start to understand these all have their own movements, which I'll send you and you can review together, then you start to understand when you look at any yoga pose, you say, this pose is affecting pelvis. This pose is starting to affect femur. This pose is affecting, the upper body. So you start to see, okay, I see what parts are really moving to make this pose possible. And then each pose you start to think about which myofascial group is it actually targeting. So there's 10 myofascial groups, and it goes like this. Let me see if we can get a visual. So it starts down at the legs, and it goes first through the groin. And I tend to like to touch because then it starts to wake up the brain body connection. That's me, but you might be able to just memorize. But it goes groin, and then it goes quads. How many quads are there?
4.
4. So then it goes groin, quads, and then hip flexor, right? The hip flexor pulls the femur up, hip flexor, and then it goes, what does the glutes do? Here, how do you stretch the glutes? Then it goes glutes, like a pigeon pose. Then you straighten the leg out, take it to the floor, and then you go, if you go forward, that stretches your, that's right, stretches your hamstrings. And then if you go forward and do a forward fold, what is this tissue all called? Do you know? That's going to be the thoracolumbar. There's a big line of fascia that connects your low back all the way up through the thoracic spine, all the way up to the back of your skull. But we call it the thoracolumbar. And then as you go into a back bend, what muscles does it stretch? Rectus abdominis. And then when you go to a side bend, what's it stretch? Obliques, you got it. And then when you do a side bend with a twist, what's it stretch? Yeah, so you're going to get the transverse abs, end of muscle. If you take an arm up, go to the side and go forward a little bit, you're going to get a muscle on your back that connects from the top of your hip to your first rib. Does anyone know what it's called?
Well, I don't know what it's actually called. What is it? Does it start with the R? It's the QL.
QL, you got it. The QL, quadratus laborum. Good job. Quadratus laborum. And then we just include like this area, upper back in front of chest as the upper body, or you can think pecs, rhomboids. What's this one? Trapezius. That's it. But we tend to just call it the upper body because most of the upper body stretches get a lot of these areas. So if you start to learn the myofascial groups, I could say like, okay, I'll send you a list of them. But when you're doing a forward fold, Uttanasana, what myofascial group is the main focus of that posture? Hamstrings, you got it. When you're doing boat pose where you hold your feet and you're on your belly, what myofascial groups are being stretched?
Rectus abdominis.
Rectus abdominis.
Quads.
quads,
Flexors.
hip flexors, and the upper body. So we start to look at our sequence and we break it down and we start to say, okay, so what is this pose actually doing? You might think, what skeletal segments are moving or shifting to get us into this position? And then what myofascial group is being stretched? Now, why does this become important? Well, it becomes important because if somebody has trouble, let's say in a low lunge thigh stretch, if you know the thigh stretch is meant to focus on and stretch the quadricep group, well, they can't put one knee on the floor because it hurts, but you know this is a quad stretch. Now what you have to do is think of what's another way we can do this. So for example, if you're doing a low lunge, and somebody in class can't do a low lunge thigh stretch, we know this pose is meant to stretch the quadriceps and the hip flexor. What's another pose we can do?
Saddle.
Saddle could be one. Half saddle. You can have them, they could even lie on their belly and hold the foot in Ekapada Bekasana, right? A standing thigh stretch will target the same area as you take the knee back behind you even. So when you understand the myofascial groups, you understand what you're trying to stretch or what we're trying to engage in each pose, then we can adjust when it seems necessary, variation or create modification. So this is why the anatomy becomes really important. And oftentimes students they appreciate, like, why am I doing this pose? What is it meant for? Because really each pose it was created for a specific reason. And you might even start to find, these classical poses, sometimes they work well, and sometimes even the classical poses could be adjusted, upgraded to something different, So I highly recommend, getting the anatomy pretty clear so that you have the information you need. When someone says, why am I doing this pose? And you're like, oh, because someone taught me to teach this pose. It's really beneficial when you say, oh, this is meant to be a hamstring stretch. Maybe they say, it hurts my hamstring or it hurts my low back. So then you can say, bend your knees or do this one on your back or use a chair or use a block or use the wall. So we need to know how to modify, how to create sustainable yoga so we can guide people in a really smart, in a wise way, So what I'll do for y'all, I'll send you a little packet of handouts. And then Emily and Kayla will assign some homework, just going through, even if you don't memorize it all yet, but going through and using the list of my groups, just going through and being like, what does this posture stretch? And just getting really clear on it. And then maybe for yourselves, even starting to look, like what parts of the skeleton move to even create that stretch? Like for example, before we close, if you want to stretch the glutes, you need to take the femur bone into external rotation, and then you need to create flexion at the hips to stretch the glute, right? So you start to understand what movements, what actions help to create that stretch, All right. So I'll send you the handouts. Thanks for your time. Thanks for hanging out, putting up with me over internet. I'd love to just actually be there with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to write me. You can find me, you can email me at kgyoga33@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram. There's actually a few classes on Instagram for free at Kenny Graham Yoga. You can find me in Costa Rica in Punta Islita on the Nicoya Peninsula. And hopefully the next time I teach you, I get to hang out there. So yeah, just as you just put it in your mind, move, have fun with yoga, but also like we start to tune into like why am I doing this? And this is working for my body, you know? Like I could never sit like Ava is sitting. That's incredible to me. In my brain, I'm like, that must hurt her knees. But for her, she has this natural internal rotation that seems to just work. But for me, like for years, I was trying to turn my legs in and they just didn't want to do it. And I had to like come to terms with like, oh, my bones. My teacher, when I met him, he's like, your legs don't really turn in at all. And I was like, yeah, thanks. I've been trying for a long time, you know, but just to appreciate our gifts and appreciate the places where we have boundaries, because boundaries are just as important as like expansion with yoga, like being able to pull in and expand out. So thanks, y'all. Have a good night. Do you get to go home now?
Pretty close.
So wait, like what time do you finish? 5:30 or 6? 6? Oh, okay. Okay, wait, can we close? Kayla, are you gonna lead us in a chant to close?
Yeah.
You're hoping you forgot.
All right, that's awesome. All right. I'm gonna take a seat then. And I don't know if I'm gonna kind of sing to myself because when you sing, I feel like over Skype or over Zoom, it like mismatches and you're just gonna hear me like blowing up the mic. But I do like this chant and I'm all by myself.
All right. Let's take a seat and a nice deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And more just like that. We'll go. Okay, together. May all beings be happy and free everywhere.
I'm nothing like you. I'm something like you. I'm nothing but you. Namaste. Thanks for practicing. Thanks for your attention. Have a good night. And
Thank you.
hopefully I get to hang out in Santa Cruz with you. I miss that studio space. It's a
Come
good,
see us.
thank you. All right. Have a good night. Have fun for your last half hour.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know what to, I want to say sweet dreams because I'm ready for bed. Doce sueños. Gracias. Bye.
Bye, Kenny. Good night.